Good morning, everyone. Welcome to City Council Chambers here at City Hall for our council meeting, February the 17th, 2015. Thanks for joining us here in Chambers, and those of you tuning in online, welcome. We need to start today's meeting with a roll call, please, Madam Clerk.
Okay. Mayor Robertson's in the chair. Councillor Louis. Councillor Stevenson. Councillor Deal. Here. Councillor Jang. Councillor Reimer. Councillor Meggs. Councillor Ball is absent. Councillor Carr. Councillor Affleck. And Councillor DeGenova. Mr. Mayor, you have a quorum.
Oh, just hang on. I can't get it.
There we go. Okay, welcome again, everyone. We're starting today with a Lunar New Year celebration kickoff. We have a proclamation for the week that's ahead, celebrating Lunar New Year, and some esteemed guests who are here, who I would like to invite up to say a few words. So maybe first, why don't I invite these gentlemen up here to join me before I read the proclamation and ask them to say some words once I've read that. I'll introduce to you leaders in our community who do extraordinary work to organize events. The Chinese New Year Parade in Chinatown, which is a very important civic event now with official civic event status. That is one of the great celebrations in our streets of the year, regardless of the weather. And that will be happening this weekend. And an enormous amount of energy goes into this organizing from many, many community groups. And some of the leaders of these groups are here who've made this possible for so many years in Vancouver and are gearing up for this weekend. So I will introduce, first of all, James Chu from the Chinese Benevolent Association of Vancouver. And Fred Kwok is here, who's Chinese Cultural Center, Greater Vancouver. You'd come on up. Willie Chan from the Vancouver Chinatown Merchants Association. Doug Purdy from Success. Hilbert Yu from Chinese Freemasons, the Vancouver branch. And Raymond Tam from Shanyi Benevolent Association. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us here. I will, why don't I read this? Invite you to say a few words. The official proclamation for this week. Whereas the City of Vancouver is home to a multitude of cultures and languages from around the world and values diversity as a source of strength. And whereas the City of Vancouver believes that celebrating diversity, be it gender, ability, ethnicity, religion, or sexual orientation, helps create a vibrant community in which all individuals live in mutual respect and peace. And whereas the City of Vancouver is home to a large and diverse Asian Canadian community that has contributed significantly to the social and economic vitality of our city, and whereas the City of Vancouver believes that sharing and celebrating community-based festivals enhances the connection between citizens of diverse cultures and interests, and whereas Lunar New Year celebrations encompass many traditions, including that of Chinese, Vietnamese, Korean cultures, and is one of the most important holidays of the year for many Vancouver residents. And whereas Lunar New Year has become an integral celebration in the City of Vancouver, now therefore I, Gregor Robertson, the Mayor of the City of Vancouver, do hereby proclaim the week of February 19th to 25th, 2015 as Lunar New Year Celebration Week in the City of Vancouver. So be it. Thank you. James, would you like to say a few words?
首先感谢温哥华市政府的各位议员对温哥华发放春节庆会的认同、重视跟大力的支持。市政府把温哥华庆会成为温哥华3大活动之一。对此，我代表温哥华发放春节庆会筹备委员会对市政府、对市长致以衷心的感谢。同时，代表我们华人社会对在座的各位议员、各位新闻朋友、各位出席的嘉宾 致以新年的祝福，羊年大吉佳利，恭喜发财。
Okay. What Mr. Chu says, thanks city government to so many years support for us, and then now it's become the major events in Vancouver, one of the three major events in Vancouver. We deeply appreciate the city government to support us. We hope this time will be very successful event. Thank you very much.
On behalf of the Greater Vancouver Chinese Cultural Center, I'd like to address our blessing to the mayor, all members of the City Council of Vancouver, and all residents in Vancouver City. Prosperous year and happiness in the family. Gong hei fa choi. Thank you.
On behalf of the Vancouver Chinatown Merchants Association, I thank you to the city, give the proclamation to the city of Chinatown Merchants, and I hope I simply, sorry. So, happy Chinese Lunar New Year to all. Gong hei fa choi.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Success and on behalf of the other organizers of this most important community social pathway event in the city of Vancouver, I welcome you all on Sunday to join us in Chinatown, 10 o'clock in the morning, to enjoy, like I say, the pathways to multiculturalism and interculturalism in Vancouver. It is with the help of the city and the mayor's office and the council that we're able to do this, and we are very grateful for the opportunity to share our culture with people and have those individuals share their culture with us. So all the best. Gong hei fa choi.
On behalf of the Chinese Freemasons, we like to thank you for your support, and then please continue to support us in the future.
Good morning, everyone. On behalf of Song Yi Benevolent Association, I wish everyone going to have a happy new year and 恭喜發財，身體健康。
Thank you again for joining us to kick things off for the celebration week. And we'll look forward to seeing lots of people out at the parade and hopefully some sunshine this year. Now, Xin Yan Kuai La. Yang Yan Kuai La. Happy New Year. Gong hei fa choi. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks, James. Thank you. Okay, thanks again for joining us, our community leaders, and good luck. Thank you. Good luck getting ready for Sunday and all the other celebrations. And Thursday night is officially Chinese New Year, so there'll be lots of celebrating through the week. So on with the agenda here in council. Council is required to meet in camera later this week. The reasons and authority under the Vancouver Charter are listed in the updated agenda. Would someone like to move that motion? I had Councillor Deal and Councillor Jang seconds. All those in favor? Any opposed? and that carries. So we go on to our minutes to adopt. Minutes number 1 are from the regular council meeting, February the 3rd, 2015. Any corrections to those minutes from our last council meeting? A mover, Councillor Deal moves, Councillor Jang seconds. All those in favor? Any opposed? And that carries. Our second minutes are from the regular council meeting that followed our City Finance and Services meeting, February the 4th. Any corrections to those minutes? Council, a mover and seconder. Councillor Jang, a seconder. Councillor Meggs, all those in favor? Any opposed? And that carries. Our third set of minutes is from the Court of Revision meeting, February 4th. Any corrections to those? Councillor Deal moves, Councillor Jang seconds. All those in favor? Any opposed? And that carries unanimously. And we are done with minutes. We need a motion to go into Committee of the Whole. Councillor Carr, seconded by Councillor Meggs. All those in favor? Any opposed? That carries. So Council now sitting in committee will consider the consent agenda items. We have 3 administrative reports on the agenda. Council may adopt the recommendations within all of these reports collectively in one single motion, unless members wish to hold any of the reports for debate, separate vote, or because of conflict of interest. I don't have anyone on the queue. That might be a first. No reports being held for further debate. So I will ask for a motion to adopt the recommendations in the consent agenda. And Councillor Deal beat you to it there. And any debate? All those in favor of all the recommendations in those reports? Any opposed? That carries unanimously. There are 3 reports that were just approved in terms of recommendations. The first is the Powell Street Overpass Project. Road establishment and sale of city-owned remnant property at 900 block Powell Street. The second is Powell Street Overpass Project, road establishment and sale of city-owned remnant properties at 1100 block Powell Street. And the third is grant applications for Sun Yat-sen, garden renewal, and asset management planning. And we had an added item in terms of administrative reports, a memo from the city manager's office with respect to Vancouver Board of Parks and Recreation. And that is on the agenda, just for those to note. And we may be referring to that later in the agenda with respect to a motion that is here before council. So we are on to our 2 report references for today. We have one on earthquake preparedness. We have an update from the team on that front, and we also have an annual update from City Studio. And I've been asked, given the students who are here from City Studio who need to get back to school, that we vary the agenda. Do we need a motion to vary the agenda? Well, yeah, of course we do. Councillor DeGenova, and all those in favor of varying the agenda to switch those 2 around? Any opposed? And that carries. So we'll start with the City Studio annual update, which is to be presented, I guess, kicked off by Sadhu Johnson, our Deputy City Manager, who has been a force of nature here at the city and supporting City Studio. And we're joined by Dwayne Elverum of City Studio and Janet Moore from the City Studio as well. And I'll start with Sadhu. Welcome.
Great. Thank you. Is this mic on?
It is on.
Mayor and Council, thank you very much. And we have tried over the last couple of years to ask our friends from City Studio to come in and give you an update on how the program is going. So really enthusiastic about the work they've done in the last year, supporting our overall agenda on the Engaged City Task Force, on the Healthy City Initiative, and on the Greenest City Action Plan implementation. So I'm going to ask Janet and Dwayne to jump in. They've got a video and a PowerPoint, and then we'll be here to answer questions. So without further ado, I want to thank them for being here. We've got a number of students here who you'll be hearing from, and Lena Suits is here as well, who's our coordinator that many of you have met on many occasions. So very, very appreciative of their being here. Thank you.
Welcome, Janet and Dwayne.
I think we're starting with a video first, and then we'll begin. Is that right?
Okay.
Well, I love City Studio. It's a great program.
It allows me to see the beauty in the city.
It's crazy how much my life has changed because I was a part of this. So City Studio is an innovation hub inside of City Hall. It's a partnership between the 6 post-secondary institutes in Vancouver and the city. And it takes the students from these 6 post-secondaries, we work with key city staff, and we prototype and launch experimental projects for the city using the processes of design and dialogue.
So the students here are in the semester at City Studio program, and they work together for 12 weeks, 5 days a week, 9:30 to 3:30. So it's an intensive, cohort-based, interdisciplinary project.
To do our work, we use a project framework called the City Studio Challenge. In order to get credit for the course and land projects on the ground, students have to accomplish 5 things, and each thing begins with an S. They have to find city staff, they have to develop sponsorship and support, they have to find a site in Vancouver, they have to develop a community steward to carry on the work after their project is done, and they have to design a prototypical project that can scale for impact.
Ultimately, what we've seen through City Studio is we've just had thousands and thousands of student hours on the ground making our community a better place and coming up with really new ideas that we get to then learn from and hopefully replicate across the city.
So we wanted to transform underutilized spaces in Vancouver's parks into places of outdoor learning, where we could bring the classroom outside and then we could just really reconnect kids with nature. We had a really good idea, but we didn't really know how to go about the steps of how to do it, and they showed us like the ideation process, and then just got us in contact with the right people, basically.
City Studio kind of gives you this complex tapestry of skills.
I learned how to work in a group, how to ask for donations, how to pitch a project, how to host a dialogue, how to host a stakeholders meeting.
The city is the classroom, and like, we're outside and this is school.
This is how school should be.
Because we love what we're doing, we love the people that we work with, and we're inspired by what we're doing. It's like, I've never felt so fulfilled by like what's basically getting me university credits. It's insane.
City Studio is the classroom of the future. That they're actually learning how to be in their city. They're learning how cities are actually built, and we think of them as collaborative city builders now.
And to see that as a student, I actually have the power to launch something real in the city, which I never thought I had the ability to do before.
We hear from students over and over again how the City Studio framework and the City Studio experience helps them live their values while they're in school very deeply.
Young people should be at the table helping to make those decisions about their future.
I'm empowered to change the world for the better and change the city for the better. And
City Studio has really helped me find my voice.
For myself, it realigned me to do public service and actually wanting to do things. So once City Studio is over, our project's not over. The project in me is not over. It's going to happen. I just want to go out there and do things.
It's been incredible. There's nothing really like it I've ever experienced anywhere else.
I love City Studio because it's changed my life.
So we have our 3rd year annual report.
Don't step over.
Back away from the line. So thank you very much, Mayor and Council. Congratulations, Mayor, on your 3rd term. Welcome back, returning councillors, and congratulations on new councillors. This is a very exciting time for us to be able to present our project. My name is Dwayne Elverum, and I co-direct and co-found City Studio.
I'm Janet Moore. I'm the co-founder and co-director as well.
And we're here with our whole team. Lena Suits, of course. And Heather O'Hara. And where's Fiona McAlpine? There you are, Fiona McAlpine, communications coordinator. And the students in Hobson, Lynn. So we're going to say a little bit about the project, but we wanted to open up by saying that we're entering our 4th year. This is the 2nd time that we've presented in council. And as you know, many of the councillors have been down to the studio, and we'll have an invitation for you at the end to invite all of the councillors down to the studio to participate in our project and our courses.
Just waiting for the slide. The slides? The next slide?
So I just click. my role.
There we go.
There we go.
So City Studio is an innovation hub inside City Hall where we connect students from the 6 public post-secondary to city staff and directly to community members. And we work on the 3 programs, the Greenest City program, the Healthy City strategy, and the Engaged City strategy. So all projects have a city staff connected to them, working directly towards those strategies. And, yeah, go ahead. So you can see we have 3 key programs. We have the studio program that you heard about in the video, where there's 20 students from all 6 institutions are welcome. It's interdisciplinary. It's focused on projects with city staff. We also have the partner network, which Lena Suits coordinates, and she runs 15 courses per semester where faculty members can connect with Lena from any of the campuses, and they rethink their course, whether it's engineering, women's studies, urban studies, and direct it towards city staff and a city project. So it's not just what's happening in the studio, it's also this partner network, 30 courses a year, and that's happening. And the third thing we're doing is a lot more convening and consulting. This model is of a lot of interest to other cities, and we'll talk more about what we're doing with that convening and consulting.
And so Janet and I have been teaching together for now our 10th year, collaboratively, interdisciplinary, project-based coursework. Janet's the director of the semester in dialogue at SFU, and I have come from Emily Carr previously, where I was the assistant dean in foundation and an academic advisor. And in those 10 years of teaching together, we started to hear the same things over and over again from our students. The planet's in trouble. We're hearing about it on the news. We're not learning how to do work on it while we're in class. We're not learning how to do the work in class. And you can imagine after 10 years, this kind of thing accumulates in you and you have to act on it. It's not enough to try to tell students it'll be okay, you can work on the planet after your degree is over. They don't believe you. So City Studio was born out of this question that Janet and I had: how can we have the biggest possible impact through our work? What could we do as professors that we could multiply our impact and scale the work that we're doing and really answer the call to our students? And the answer was City Studio.
So we have 4 impact areas that we're going to walk through in this presentation, and then we're going to have some of our students talk about their experience. So the first is students. We think that we need to increase engagement on campus and in their classrooms, and we also are interested in retention. So how can these students stay in Vancouver? We hear from them all the time that they don't actually imagine themselves working and living in Vancouver, and we want to have them feel more connected to the city, and retention is a key piece. Our second impact area is around projects. We're prototyping. We're not producing just research papers and reports that sit on shelves. We're really trying to get the experimentation culture happening at the city. So how can we do a demonstration project really quickly and test models for prototypes? The third area is city staff. We know that city staff have amazing expertise. They want to innovate, and they have a lot of energy. So we're working with a lot of champions in the city who want to try things, and we're seeing this shift in culture happening with city staff. And the fourth is institutional relationships. We know that the universities have a way of being, the city has a way of being, and we think the only way to work on these really complex, difficult questions and problems is if we actually collaborate, and that there's potential for institutional transformation as a result of these kind of third spaces where we can work.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about each of the 4 areas of impact, and the first area is students. So we've spent many years thinking really carefully about engagement and retention of graduates in the city. And we imagine that how can we think about retention through deep engagement? Students tell us that they want more choices about what they do and where they live, and we think of the City Studio experience as one of the ways to gain them more freedom and power in their choices and careers. I think if each of us think back before you were city councillors, before you were teachers or journalists or biologists or directors or ministers, before you had the jobs that transformed you into the person you are today, imagine you're 23 or 24. When did you have the most engaged experience in your life, inside or outside of class? What was that aha moment that took you from where you were heading to the path that you're on now? And if you're like almost everyone we talk to, and Janet and I have asked this question thousands and thousands of times over the past 10 years. If you're like almost everybody, you'll say, you didn't have your most engaged moment in front of a laptop, you didn't have your most engaged moment in a classroom, it probably wasn't even on a campus. It was when you were working with others in a shared goal outside, using your mind and your body, working in a group, struggling together, trying to do something real where your actions had consequences. So we said, well, why don't we just create that experience for students so that they can have that most engaged experience while they're in school, outside, where the idea is that the city can be the classroom. The City Studio model has come out of this, and as Janet mentioned at the top, it's starting to get the attention of cities across Canada, in the States, and around the world. And recently, City Studio was a case study in Tendenser Sweden's 15-region, 9-city study in the European Union about how to retain grads in cities. They saw Vancouver as undertaking an experiment that would really matter to keep their graduates in cities because they're experiencing the problems that all cities around the world are experiencing. And as a result of the last 4 years trying to do this, we've managed to create a network of 3,000 students, 113 faculty that have contributed well over 75,000 hours of public sector innovation, projects on the ground, skills, and training. The next project impact area we'd like to talk about is projects. And this is the essential center of our work at City Studio that finds its DNA in the key program areas that the city runs, the Green City Strategy, the Healthy City Strategy, and the Engaged City Task Force for the moment. And in the last 3.5 years, we've managed to put 156 projects, experiments, and prototypes on the ground, engaging 180 staff in our wide circle and 60 staff directly in the co-creation of projects and experiments on the ground. It's a movement inside City Hall that we feel has momentum, and it's an effective process of getting students to connect and engage city staff and the issues in their city. They work on a variety of project areas in almost every department, creating prototypes. We've mapped hundreds and hundreds of orphan spaces in the city. We've worked on shareable city initiatives related to the tool library and other initiatives, creating street murals. When the students found out that Portland had 300 street murals and we had 20, rather two. Apologies, it became a challenge to how can we actually chase Portland. Other things we do, things like placemaking in Legenboot Square and others, outdoor schooling through the rewilding plan, food waste recovery, projects on Commercial Drive in the Britannia Community Center, deconstruction and wood waste, active transportation with cycling and bike lab and bike repair stations, emergency preparedness with emergency preparedness apps, social inclusion related to the Vancouver Foundation study, especially in our building stock, which you'll hear about today. Open data experiments is a course we're running right now that's happening in the studio this morning around the Broadway corridor and the transit referendum, building community gardens. The Prado Parklet Cafe demonstration project was launched before it became a parklet. Migratory Bird Day and the black-capped chickadee was born as an idea in City Studio, and Sadhu challenged us to work on a bird program for the City of Vancouver. The ongoing urban orchards, harassment and trans-lake biodiversity, and of course the ever-present, ever-challenging dog waste problem in the City of Vancouver. We are initiating and prototyping some exciting work in that area. And then, I apologize for the size of the text, but this is where we're headed. This is just a partial list of the city staff that we worked directly with over the last 3.5 years and growing. And then the exciting thing about the city staff relationship is that Lena, who coordinates all of the relationships between city staff and the projects on campus, and with Janet and I in the studio, the list is growing. We're getting more and more interest as staff find out what kind of engaging and exciting experience this could be, the rewarding nature of the working with the students on the co-creation of real projects, and then moving the dial on what is essentially their work in the city as well. And then we get lots of feedback from city staff. I won't read this out loud, but really interesting response from Sue and HR. And then, of course, Jerry Dobrovolny is famous for saying that his trips to City Studio the best 2 hours of his day, which is an honor.
Right.
And then, I think that's it. Huh? Yeah.
So you want to introduce them?
Okay, so first we're going to hear from Hobson and Tim, and they're going to talk about the Living in Butte project. Just a few minutes to give you a taste of what the project is and what it can be.
Hello, good morning. Thank you for having us. My name's Hobson Lin, and this is Tim Lam. We're here on behalf of Sarah Pratt and Rob Nordrum, and together we are the Living at Butte project team from City Studio's Spring 2014 cohort.
The Living at Butte project started when Viva Vancouver came to City Studio and identified the Butte Street Plaza as a site with possibilities for public space, after Viva closed off an entire block for pedestrians in the West End. The plaza is located at Butte and Davie Street, next to the Rainbow Crosswalks in the heart of the Davie Village. Working with Jennifer Shield from Viva, the project aimed to explore and address the challenges of underutilization, as well as cultivate connections under the Healthy City strategy to combat social isolation.
Now, as you saw in the video, all of our projects at City Studio are built around this framework called the City Studio Challenge. This is also known as the 5 S's. The first S for us was site. This was pretty natural because Living at Butte surrounded around the Butte Street Plaza.
The second S is staff. Our key contact was Jennifer Shield at Viva, but we also had help from many others, including Doug Smith of Sustainability, Steve Cho of Viva, and the planners Holly Salvady and John Gronberg.
So the next test is support. In addition to all these awesome City Hall champions, our project wouldn't have been possible without the support of local organizations such as the Vancouver Pride Society, the West End BIA, Weston Arts, Gordon Neighborhood House, King George Secondary School, and all the local businesses that surrounded the plaza.
The next S is scalability. We began with creating and executing a method for site visits and pedestrian research. Next, we held numerous meetings with local community members and organizations. The highlight of our project was our 3 events. They were held in the plaza to gain feedback about the space and demonstrate possible uses and activities. This included free hot chocolate, chalkboards for feedback, games, live music, and new furniture.
And the last S is stewardship. Now, while this ultimately lies with the city planners and Viva, we created 2 items to sort of help this along. The first one being a sign. This is a yes sign, not a no sign. It includes example activities that do not require a permit and explicitly invites the community into the space. The next item we have is our report. It includes all the details of our project research and our key recommendations.
Kind of an extra S that we added for the purpose of this presentation is status, or current status. Although the pilot phase has now come to a conclusion, we're excited to see that the city has proceeded with requesting proposals for design consultation services. We're honored that the city has mentioned our report in the RFP and are glad that the community has embraced the plaza, now wishing to name the permanent one after the late Jim Diva.
So what's the impact of all this? Well, for me, City Studio has redefined education. To be able to work with City Hall champions like you guys is just absolutely amazing. You know, we get to work on real projects that tackle real city issues. I've not only learned, but also gained practical experience and skills ranging from diplomacy, design, to dialogue.
The project gave me on-the-ground experience and skills that I can carry with me throughout my education and career, tools I would have never received through traditional classes. By giving us the opportunity to make a real impact, the project made me feel empowered to create positive change in our Vancouver communities.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Hello, my name's Brendan. I've jumped right out of the video you just watched.
I'm Mercedes, also in the video. And I'm Nat.
And we're all from the most recent alumni cohort, so we were just in it this past semester. We call ourselves the Apartment Innovators. We're missing our one member, Sarah, who loves dogs. We don't know where she is, but she couldn't be here with us today. The project that we created was called Ask Lauren. And so what we did is we piloted a community concierge inside of an apartment building. A community concierge is a volunteer role inside of an apartment building that acts as a liaison to welcome residents home and to connect them with one another. This was a role that we played in a building called the Lauren, 1051 Broughton Street, which is a part of the STIR program. We spent about 50 hours altogether as volunteers within this apartment building for a week in the end of November, along with an event that we created to welcome the neighbors to the building. The reason we created this project is because out of the Vancouver Foundation, 1/3 of Vancouverites say that it's difficult to make friends, and 1/4 of Vancouverites say that they found that they were lonely more often than they would like. And we know that this is especially true in apartment buildings, so we wanted to target that specific group to find a way to create vertical communities for them.
So having all this in mind, we approached John Grottenberg, a West End community planner, who really helped us to create the project around specific city goals. Most notably, we worked on the Healthy City Strategy, Goal 7, Cultivating Connections, and working within the Engaged City Task Force, their priority action actually asked for a neighborhood liaison. So this worked perfectly with the community concierge. Also through John, we had amazing support from Paul Taylor, the executive director of the Gordon Neighborhood House, who really helped us get the project on the ground, as it is right next door to the Lauren. And we also hosted an event for the residents specifically that was a Welcome to the Neighborhood event, fully sponsored by Westbank, the developer of the building. At this event, we actually polled the attendees, and we found that 65% of people who attended found that they met someone new through the community concierge. And overwhelmingly, 96% of people wanted the project to continue. So we found that this was a huge success. Our man hours being there and the event we threw at the end, people were very receptive to it, and it was amazing. So the only question is, like, where do we go from here?
Well, where that leaves us is that from our project, we believe that the community concierge is an amenity, and every new development in Vancouver should have one because of the community amenity contribution required of all developers. From our final presentations, we've had a lot of interest from City of Vancouver staff who worked on the Healthy City Strategy, and we're excited to see where our project goes next. Our biggest takeaway from our semester, I think, is that people just need a reason to start something. Our reason was being at City Studio and being able to work on this project. And for the residents of the Lauren, their reason to get to know one another was the community concierge.
Unlike the students before us, we've gained so many different skills from this. I can't even begin to explain all the different things that I've learned, and it was such an amazing opportunity. I was like, gosh, you can watch it again, it's on YouTube. Thank you.
Thank you.
So just the final impact area is this institutional relationships piece, and that the pilot project is bigger than we ever imagined. You can see all the partners we have listed in the logos there, grant support from Vancouver Foundation and Van City and all the other partners. We've won 3 awards in social innovation in the last couple of years from Tides Canada, from the Canadian Association for Municipal Administrators, and from Ashoka U, which is, and we were also shortlisted for a Wharton Award, again, around social innovation. And we have calls coming in from around the world who want to learn the model, and it's very exciting. McConnell Foundation has just signed on as a partner to help us scale the model across Canada. Next slide. And so we are having an open house for those of you who haven't been to City Studio yet on February 25th from 1 to 5 in the afternoon. We'll be sending that out through CityWire as well. And the Hubbub, which is our popcorn event, will be on April 10th again this year. That's when all the projects are presented back. And okay, and the 4th thing, we're going to go back to the 3rd, is that we are imagining a graduate diploma starting 1 year from now that will be an 8-month intensive program. We're working on which universities are going to be involved in credentialing that, and it would be a program that students could take and add to a master's program. So really moving that forward so it can start in fall of next year. And the last thing.
And so very excited to share the news that we recently received a McConnell Foundation grant for 2 years. Part of it is to nail and scale. So we want to nail the model in Vancouver and really refine and oil this piece so that we can share the model in Canada and around the world. And they're helping us run what we're calling the Art of Cities, the City Studio model, May 25th, 26th, and 27th in Vancouver, where we're inviting cities from across Canada to join us. And the innovation is that we're inviting teams from each city to come. high-level city administrator, a high-level university administrator, a keen faculty member, and a student rock star to come and work as a team, and we can workshop how they can build this kind of model in their own city. We're now up to, Heather, I'm saying 7 cities have confirmed. We're waiting to hear from Halifax and others, and we're also having international visitors from Germany, Mexico, and the US. People are asking to come and witness the experience so that we can build the program from there. You can imagine it's a very exciting time for us to, having started underneath the Canby Street Bridge where we still thrive and love it, and now we get to share it with cities around the world.
Just want to invite you all to come down. So that's the last thing. And we have books here if you want to.
Okay, thank you very much for the report. We've got a couple councillors on the queue. First, I'd like to thank you two for your incredible leadership on creating City Studio from scratch and leading the charge for these years. It's been amazing to see, and it's a great contribution to the city. I think 75,000 hours is the estimate now of student time, which is an extraordinary gift for, and it goes every way. It's obviously a great benefit for the city and in catalyzing projects that there hasn't been the bandwidth to make happen here. But I know lots of great learnings from students and faculty and community partners and city staff as well. So thanks for your leadership, and to Lena as well, and the other staff that are involved, and a shout out to Maura Quayle, who was a real catalyst as well in this, helping get it going and bringing the post-secondary education institutions together who had previously not collaborated at this sort of scale, and I think we learned that that doesn't happen anywhere, that all the post-secondaries cooperate and collaborate like this in a city program. So congratulations for your amazing vision on this and making it a great reality, and congrats on the grant and the ability to roll this out across the country. Very exciting. Questions from Councillor Reimer first.
We're in council. Sorry.
You're at the wrong desk.
My computer has a trust relationship with me today, apparently. Welcome back. I can't believe 3 years. Like, the numbers are so staggering, right? What you've been able to achieve. So to say congratulations. I was just looking at your the booklet, and it looks like almost half of those numbers were in the last year that you've achieved them. So clearly you're growing and gaining momentum around hours that you're putting in projects, which is exciting. And congrats on the McConnell grant. That's a really exciting project. So a couple questions for you. First year that you've incorporated open data, not into the last cohort, but into the one that we'll see at the next annual update. Can you talk a bit about that experience and how it's, yeah, I feel like I'm leading the witness here for me, because I got to observe the project proposals. It really felt transformative. Like it really felt like it was another missing link in that deep connection with the city, but you're much closer to it. I'd be interested in your reflections.
Yeah, so when we started the City Studio project, it was born inside the Greenest City Action Plan. It was an array of really interesting problems and challenges. Since then, we've moved to the Engaged City Task Force and the Healthy City Strategy, which provide a really large field of project work for us to do. We are always trying to improve and strive towards deeper impact and more meaningful impact for the students in the city. And about 6 months ago, we thought, what could we do if we were to unleash the students on the open data catalog? What kind of new relationships could we find within the open data catalog? And what could we work on in an open data field that would have a meaningful impact on the city? So what we've settled on is moving the open data catalog and cross-cutting it through the issues of the Broadway corridor and transit in general. What kind of new relationships can we find, and what kind of new projects can we give birth to? And at the moment, there are 17 students in the studio working on 4 different project areas that will launch on April 11th, I believe. Say that again? April 10th. Thank you, Lena. April 10th. Everything from building projects that we can visualize in 3-dimensional ways, issues of open data and what it means to what mass transit means to cities and how we can move people in our cities, and then also what kind of new behaviors can we create.
It's exciting. I'm very excited for the potential of that, but it brings me to my next question around the learning, right? So what I learned from that is that open data, when there's a portal to it and there's some access to it, greatly increases the ability of external organizations looking to create relevancy with the city to be able to do that better. So you're an organization that's been very committed to continuous learning, rapid continuous learning. You have a lot to teach us. So we get this moment here in council to learn something, but what are the other ways that what you're learning gets filtered into the work that the city is doing?
Do you mean beyond open data?
On anything, like you're piloting technology, you're piloting processes, you're teaching us a lot about, it's not simple to have 6 post-secondaries working together, right? So just the concept of effective partnerships.
Yeah, that's what we're spending a lot of time working on now, is what is the essence of City Studio that allows that kind of innovation and collaboration to happen, and coming up with some real lessons learned around culture and being able to, in a design thinking mode, you say yes. And so you're in a meeting and you actually, there's no devil's advocate. You just keep saying yes to see where you're going to go with it. And that's not a typical way of academics working, nor is it a typical way of city staff working. So that's what we're hearing from staff, is I come here and I say yes, and there's not a decision being made. There's a space for creativity. And so I think that's what we're seeing, is in this space that feels neutral, we can be a different way. We can take our hats off and create together, and it's be able to take some risks. I think that's another piece.
I also add to that. One of the things that is so key is that this generation of students that we've been working with for the last decade now are really interested in participating in the way the city is built, in a way that seems unimaginable to me, even though I teach them every day. And they are in the mode of experimentation. What does it mean to really be experimenters in your city? What does it mean to really run a prototype? And if it doesn't work, it's not a failure. It's an experiment that leads to more experiments and more experiments. And we think of this culture of experimentation as one of the biggest fields that we want to play on. And I think our best work and our most rewarding work and our most satisfying work happens when city staff, students, and community experts enter this co-creation process and output a physical thing that changes the city so that we can all see what it looks like and feels like. And basically all our projects have to meet that standard for us to do.
So to that end, you had 2 projects presented, both engaged city focused. One looking at connecting potentially complete strangers who don't live next to each other, may not even live in the same community. And the other very focused on place, right? This place they were moving into. So I'm curious if you had opportunities to reflect on those 2 strategies, right? Because that's something we sort of struggle with is, you know, do you do the public spaces versus the on-site connections with people? And I don't think there's an either or answer, but sort of those relative approaches, what your learnings were. Yeah.
Any takers?
They're interested in answering. It may not be something you have time to explore in the project, because I never get to see how the sausage is made. I just get to see the sausage.
For sure. It's definitely valuable to reflect on these projects and sort of see how people connect. And part of our project was big on observation and reflection, where we actually looked at how people connected, what were they looking for, what were they asking for. The chalkboards that we put up were a big reflection of what the community really wanted to do. And we found that all they needed was a place to have activities, to be able to do stuff. And no matter whether it's, you know, within one small community or a public space out on the streets, it's mutual through all spaces.
Yeah, and for ours, we picked specific spaces. A lot of it had to do with the apartment building, had to do with the opportunities that we were provided. So because of the Gordon Neighborhood House and the connection there, and the fact that that building was literally next door, we had access to the developer. And the reason we also picked what we were doing was from personal experiences. So we had all 4 of us, had had experiences with social isolation in apartment buildings, and it's a space you spend all your time in. So we really wanted to make it something that, looking at how do you create a home and create a community in the place that you live, in the place that you spend all your time with, rather than, we actually built, like our idea actually came out of living at Butte. So because they were the previous cohort to us, we were the one after, so we were connected to like the West End planners through that. So this is kind of like an interesting like permutations of the different cultivating connections in the Healthy City strategy.
Thank you very much.
All right, next questions from Councillor Deal.
Yes, thanks very much. It's so cool. I want to go outside and play right now, but I often do. But thank you so much again. I can't wait to see the next tranche. A couple of questions, then a couple of comments. I'm looking at this also from the point of view of the staff that are working on this, and many of us in this room have worked in education and have worked with volunteers. And the old meme from a decade ago or 2 decades ago was that volunteers create work, right? They come in wanting to help, wanting to offer something, wanting to offer their energy to a positive cause, and that they actually involve a fair amount of resources to find a project for them, to make sure that they're well trained and safe and excited and that they get value out of it. It doesn't feel like that's the meme here at all. It feels very much like it's a co-learning experience and a co-growth experience, and I love that. But when we talk about this, when we scale this up and we do the Art of Cities in May, I'm really interested to hear how our resources, our staff, are talking about the value that it brings to them in their daily work. I don't know if you have any comment on that.
Lena's what he works with us.
Because you've really taken that assumption and knocked it on its heels, which is great.
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Lena Suits, the program manager at City Studio. I work a lot with city staff, matchmaking with student projects as well as with faculty across that network of partner courses that you heard about earlier. And there's quite a bit of time and legwork that goes into really nurturing that relationship. So we matchmake around priority areas. So what are you working on? What do you have time for? What are you committed to? And also, I spend a lot of time, especially in the partner network, sitting down with faculty and staff to really scope projects so that it's of value. One of the things, I actually say it outright and explicitly, this is not to make work for you, this is to make your life easier, and not only easier but more fun, and to give you something that maybe you didn't know you need. And so there's quite a bit of work. We spend time in the studio with staff. The students have those conversations with staff, and at any point, I have checks and balances in the process where we check in along the project timeline to say, how is this working? Do we need to revise? Is there someone else on your team that can support this? And it really is, we talk about our relationships being like gold at City Studio, and they really are. And we really mentor our students on how to nurture those relationships. And so it's not just here's a project and at the outset or at the end you'll have an outcome. It really is about the relationship all the way along, and that relationship isn't burdensome, but it's actually beneficial, and there's mutual beneficence along the way.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
Mr. Johnson.
What we realized also was that our staff are constantly being approached by different faculty in some of the institutions that are partners in this. And it takes a lot of time for our staff to get a random call to figure out, is this a fit? How do we work together? Now, we just say call City Studio, and they plug them into their process. And so then the City Studio process will undertake their review, and it'll come back to the right staff through a connection that they know. And that's actually saving staff a lot of that legwork and that time. And so we really changed the dynamic from this being a burden to actually being a resource. And it's got the supports around it, around project delivery and stuff like that. So it's actually really something that staff look forward to participating in, rather than when we started, which was, I don't know, this is going to take a lot of time.
I think there are a lot of organizations that use volunteers that could learn from that. Mr. Johnson, actually, while you're there, I was going to ask a question for you as well. In general, large bureaucracies such as City Hall are seen to be risk adverse, and as a culture. And this feels like we're inviting challenging assumptions, inviting taking risks, inviting getting knocked out of our comfort zone, right into our own rooms and saying, bring it on. And in fact, it feels like a lot of our staff are not only embracing that, but always wanted to do this, and this gives them perhaps an outlet to do some slightly more creative work than their job description might involve. Do you sense something around the culture of City Hall and culture of some of the departments, that having this incredible creative drive that they already had, having it be opened up and given a place to live through City Studio?
Yeah, I think it's a balance. I think it's also really allowing the staff to communicate to the students what the concern might be, so that the students can design their projects around it. It's not like, oh, let's throw caution to the wind and just do anything. It's well, here's what we think about as staff. And so it brings, rather than us having to go and say no, it brings, well, we're really interested in doing this. Here are some of the things that we would be thinking about and that might be concerns to us. And then the students and the staff can design those kinds of issues into the project. And sometimes we'll say to the students, well, we're pretty nervous about this, but let's explore it. And then half the time the students will say, yeah, we kind of see what you're saying. Let's not go that direction. And so it allows for the students to really have a chance to look at it. And then we require them to go through the same process. They got to get permits. They got to do consultation. Right. So it's not like they get to just skip all of that. They have to go through it, and I think it's a good learning experience for them to understand what does it take to get a permit. What are some of the things that we have to take into account? So it's a nice balance, I think, in both ways. Pushes us a little bit, pushes them a bit.
That's just awesome. And just as someone who's been a student, a teacher, a TA, designs courses for UBC Continuing Studies, trained loggers to restore fish habitat up north, and all kinds of different learning models. I just think this is brilliant, and I can't wait to see it rolling across Canada.
Well, just one closing thought on that. We had a really interesting experience with the students around the campfire project. I don't know if you remember, it was in the news a lot, and it was a bit of a
more campfires.
Fire. The students wanted to have campfires, and they still do. It sounds like. And so we were, like, here's the things to balance. And so we convened meetings with the fire department. It was this, instead of this kind of no, well, what are the concerns? And so we eventually said, okay, let's do a pilot. Here's the kind of things that we'd be taking into account. And the students were out in the media, and the students got flooded with calls with people with concerns about air quality and things that they hadn't even thought of. Right. And then the students came back and said, we found a round of, we're going to bring a little propane thing in. We'll still have the gathering experience without some of the air quality concerns. And so they landed on that based on their process and hearing from the public rather than us having to say, no, you can't do this. And so it's that kind of thing where we all go through a learning together, and they kind of come to the point of an answer that they actually had a great community. They did their event. It was really successful, and they did it without without many of the concerns being raised from the community about air quality and whatnot. So
thank you very much.
Balance. Thanks.
Okay, next questions are from Councillor Carr.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Well, congratulations to you, your students, and also our staff for the collaborative work that happens. I have to say that wow. Is that too loud? I have a particular love for this stuff because I used to teach urban geography, and I started the geography field school, an urban geography field school in Vancouver. So it's like I totally get what you're doing, and it's fabulous. So my question is around the follow-through. I really liked the fact that in the Butte project there was this sense of it's going on. This experiment is moving forward, and I'm interested in the experiment or the project around the community concierge and how you think that the students mentioned, maybe there's a potential regarding community amenity contributions. So have you talked to, for example, the neighborhoods, sort of the Coalition of Vancouver Neighborhoods, that are all the 22 neighborhoods, and they sort of get involved in community plans, and they could be ones that would be supportive, for example, of community amenities being done in this way. And have you talked to staff around how we could possibly incorporate this?
Yeah, so we haven't specifically, like that group specifically, we haven't connected with, but like Paul Taylor at the Gordon Neighborhood House, he's the executive director. And so a part of our project that we created was a toolkit. So it was, how would you implement a community concierge in apartment buildings as, like, rather than, it's kind of like you can take this and evolve it or change it to whatever apartment building you have, and so the neighborhood house has that. And then, as far as I'm aware, Paul has contacted other neighborhood houses, and having that as something that our kind of big idea would be that the neighborhood houses are the central place where the community concierge kind of like congregates, and then that branches off into the apartment buildings out in the network, so that the neighborhood houses have kind of they get to direct it, and then they become more relevant to a younger group of people than they necessarily would be. And then a part of what one of my partners was talking about was that the people working on the Healthy City strategy have actually thought about this as being something as maybe like a formal action to cultivating connections, because it has other implications around like resiliency and connecting people during disasters. So if you know everybody in your apartment building, if something goes wrong, then you'll be able to say like, oh yeah, Jim isn't here because he's on vacation, not because he's trapped in his apartment. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that was sort of like where we're thinking that's going in scalability.
Yep. Great, I get it. Neighborhood houses is one route. I encourage you to think about the community associations that are at the neighborhood level, not just the neighborhood houses, but like the 22 different neighborhoods.
Awesome. Thank you.
I think that they'd be excited by hearing about your project.
For sure.
Great.
Thanks so much.
And I have another question, and it's about one of the projects that was mentioned in the initial presentation. It's not in this report, so I'm just, but I'm curious about it, which is mapping orphaned spaces. Were there a particular, what were orphaned spaces? And is there any potential around those orphaned spaces for either affordable housing or growing food or those kinds of things?
Yeah, so in one of the first cohorts, we had a group of students that connected in time on a project called, on the pork chop piece of land at Adnac and Commercial, where there now exists a piece of public art that we produced with city staff and students in the community. And the idea was, how do you activate these orphan spaces? And the answer in this community was this piece of public art, which is a frame that looks at the mountains. You see it all over Flickr now and Facebook feeds in Italy and tourists from around the world. So it was quite a success. It's very humble. But that project unleashed this, what we thought of this kind of cultural and social capital around what would happen if we mapped more orphan spaces in the city, not to put projects on them, but to create a database. So the project itself became its own project. So now we have a compendium of, I think, maybe 700 orphan spaces in maybe 10 neighborhoods in Vancouver.
Ranging in size from?
What's that?
Ranging
Very
in
small.
size?
Yeah.
So some boulevards, pork chops, corners of land. You couldn't build a building on it necessarily, but something can happen on this land. So it's in the open data stage. It's not on the catalog yet, but we're formulating and trying to regularize the data.
I live across from one that is I think the problem with the city is that it's like, oh, is that parks or is that streets? And we don't really know who is in charge of it. So if you want to do something in that space, it's very difficult for a citizen to get a response. And so that was part of the orphan spaces, was what could we allow on orphan spaces? Who would navigate that at the city? Who do you call and talk to about, I want to put a composter, or I want to put a little garden or a piece of art, that kind of thing. So it's still not figured out, but it was more that the students there's a lot of space that we're not using.
Fantastic information. Again, I'd love to see now what. Like, how do we get that information out there in a way that people can start, and the city can start making use of those spaces. So
well, and the Orphan Spaces Project is a great example of how we're out of sync with the universities in many ways with this project, in the best ways. One of them is timeline. So the students go from September to December, they leave, but projects don't end. So they actually get kept there. We house them and we nurture them because other students will come and start to take them over. So there's a kind of consistency to this neutral space, the city studio space under the bridge that you'll see when you visit, around what it means to have a project database and a pool of possibilities, a growing pool of possibilities.
All right. Thank you so much for the annual update and all the great work done, and congrats on the big growth. And looks like there's more in store. So thanks for bringing all the students to and presentations. We'll see you at Hubbub, if not before.
And just a reminder, those of you that haven't participated in the Hubbub, it's I think they said April 10th. It's a great event down here in City Hall, so you'll smell the popcorn throughout the building, and it's a great chance to see boards of the projects and hear the student presentations. So I really encourage councillors to head down and check it out if you get a chance.
All right, thanks for that. And
next item.
Sadhu Johnston is now going to dive into our second report reference, which he's leading the charge on. We've got a whole team here on earthquake readiness and preparedness, and I'll let Sadhu introduce the team and take it from here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. This will be equally uplifting, I hope. We don't want to take you down now.
I hope not.
Okay, so if I could get the PowerPoint slides, please. We're gonna shake, rattle, and roll. Here we go. Okay. Do you see it on your screens yet, or I see it up here, but it doesn't seem to be. Okay, great. Can we get it full screen by any chance? There. Okay, read my mind. Great. So, Mr. Mayor and Council, we wanted to take an opportunity to update you. It's been about a year since you adopted the earthquake preparedness strategy So I'd like to give you our one-year update on our progress and have a chance to answer any questions that you may have. And actually, one of our objectives from last year that we communicated and that you directed us to do was to work on public education. And we've produced a short video. That seems to be a theme now. We've produced a short video that we've been sharing in the community. So I'd like to start with that video if I can. Is that, are you able to do that? Okay, thanks. And this is a short video. I think I mentioned to you we actually borrowed it from California, so we didn't reproduce this wholesale, but they allowed us to use it, and then we updated the numbers and some of the images for Vancouver. And so we'll give you a quick snapshot here. And this is going to bring you down a little bit, but we'll go back up in a moment. So this is the risks related to an earthquake. Okay, thanks.
It's a rainy morning in Vancouver. Across the region, over 2.2 million people are going about their daily routines. Tens of thousands are commuting into downtown Vancouver, over bridges and through tunnels. Some of these people have prepared themselves, their families, and their businesses for an earthquake, but most have not. At 10:07 a.m., the largest earthquake to hit the Vancouver area in modern times begins. Intense shaking lasts for over 30 seconds. Fires ignite across the region as gas lines rupture. 90,000 buildings are damaged, 20,000 of them beyond repair. When the shaking stops, thousands of people are trapped or injured. Loved ones are separated. Phone lines are overloaded. Bridges, roads, and other critical infrastructure are severely impacted, delaying rescue efforts and slowing evacuation. The supply of food, water, and aid will be limited for weeks or even months. Over 9,000 people across the region will need temporary public shelter, and first responders must prioritize their efforts and will not respond to non-life-threatening emergencies. Rebuilding will take years, but experience shows that people and organizations who plan and prepare are more likely to survive and recover quickly. The City of Vancouver has plans to respond to an earthquake, but individuals and businesses must also be prepared. You can take simple steps, like identifying a family meeting location, store food and water at home and at work, and save critical data off-site. This will empower you to help yourself, your family, and your neighbors after a major earthquake. To learn more about how to prepare for earthquakes or volunteer for a City of Vancouver emergency response program, visit us online or call 311.
So when we presented it's a black-capped chickadee, of course. Okay.
Blackbird.
We're integrating here, folks. Okay. Back on track. When we presented last time, as I mentioned, we had indicated in the plan that we wanted to do more in public education, so that video came out of that. But when we presented last time, we had also given you the HAZIS modeling that we had done that led to the plan. So the numbers, the information here is based on the HAZIS modeling that we did with our partners that were our scientific advisors to the development of the earthquake strategy. So those numbers are not pulled out of the air. That's actually based on what we might expect in a significant earthquake in our community. So what I'd like to do today is remind you of what we went through in the development of our strategy, what our top actions are in the strategy and that process, and then run through a quick update for you of some of the actions. And I'm going to ask Peter Judd, our city engineer, to give you a bit of an update on some of the work that they're doing through engineering as well. But we have other folks here that have been working on the implementation. Bill Aujala with our facilities group is here, and they've been doing work on the city facilities, which we'll mention to you. And we've got Clarence and Krista from our emergency management office, and Jackie, who does the volunteers, representatives from fire, Pat Ryan from buildings, Brian from Crow from water and sewers, utilities. So many of our staff are working on these issues on a day-to-day basis. And the earthquake we had just a couple of days ago, just a few kilometers outside of Vancouver, it's just a stark reminder that this is not a theoretical exercise. These are things that could happen tonight, could happen tomorrow. We need to constantly be updating our plans and ensuring that we're improving our readiness as an organization. But individuals as well, we certainly can't do it alone, as the video said. So I want to give you an update on a number of these strategies, and then certainly encourage councillors in your own engagement with businesses and community members to be encouraging them to be prepared in their own ways. That will make the difference in how quickly we can recover as a community. So just to remind you, as an organization, we've been working on earthquake-related issues for decades. And we had been working on vulnerability assessments and seismic upgrades to bridges. We've been working on our own response and recovery plans, the development of the HUSAR team. So we had a lot that had been done in a disparate ways across our organization. And then I think the experiences in Chile and Christchurch, as you may recall, Council, you sent 4 of our staff members to Christchurch for a month. And we really got to see the immediate response and learned a lot from that experience and brought that back into the strategy that you adopted last year. And so that's really what we went into was based on those experiences, and now with having a strategy that pulls much of this together and is a bit of a roadmap for us as we do our budgeting, as we do our work in our own facilities. We have that roadmap for prioritizing our work. So just again, as a reminder, we had a technical advisory group, which included experts locally and nationally. We had working groups in each of the key areas that are in our plan. And then we had an earthquake preparedness steering committee. We had emergency management staffing it, and then I was helping to champion it from the city manager's office perspective. And then we had partnerships with many of our organizations across the community that we're going to be relying on. If TransLink, if Port Metro Vancouver, Fortis, and Hydro, if they don't have robust plans that are dovetailed with ours, that could greatly hinder our ability to respond. And then, of course, the Vancouver Board of Trade is a partner in trying to get the message out to the business community as well. So the result was 12 primary actions and 44 supporting actions, you may recall. And they fall in the standard continuum of emergency management. So assessing the risk, reducing the risk, preparing to respond, and then our response and recovery. And so you'll see how the actions break down in those categories. And you may recall we looked at the impacts of an earthquake, the ground shaking, the liquefaction, the fires, potential landslides, which are minimal for us, and tsunamis. And then we played out what would the impacts of those be to the lifelines, the buildings, or the people and the economy. And then we played out each of those scenarios. So this is one example where we looked at liquefaction, we mapped it, and then we looked at the areas that might be impacted and looked at the strategies that we might need to pursue in those areas. So we tried to develop, Councillor Carr, you're mentioning geography. We tried to take kind of a spatial analysis on this to understand what parts of the city might be impacted by specific risks to us. And that enabled us to then look at, okay, what are some of the examples of things that we need to be doing in those specific areas around water and sewer systems, the telephone and communication systems and whatnot. So, and then of course, that enabled us to develop the actions. So in the last year, Council, we've been working away. Of the priority actions, all are either in progress or complete. We've got 2 of them that are done, and the rest, the 10 are underway. The supporting actions, 34 of the 44 are underway, 5 of which have been completed. So about 70% of our actions are in progress, and 12% are complete. So we are making progress on the actions that we identified. And just as a reminder, these are the priority actions. So it's trying to focus our efforts. These are the 12 that were the highest priority that you adopted in the plan. And the 2 that are complete we'll tell you a little bit about today, but looking at options to maintain post-earthquake transportation access to downtown Peninsula, because when we started to map this, we realized with liquefaction and the bridges and just the sheer number of people that are downtown, we really need to improve our transportation plans and be thinking about how we get in and out of downtown. So we've developed an earthquake strategy for that, and then also an evacuation plan, which Peter Judd will be able to mention to you. And then our emergency communication, so we've adopted an emergency information plan now as well. And then you can see the other actions on the screen there that are underway. So that's a very high-level overview, and what I'd like to do is to, for the first couple sections of this, I'd like to have Peter come up and run you through our work in these areas. Peter Judd?
Thanks, Oda. Mayor and Council. First of all, I'd like to say that our utility systems are actually in very good shape compared to systems in most North American cities. So notwithstanding we're talking about failures in here, it's not a consequence of the condition of the system, it's a consequence of our geography and the magnitude of earthquakes that we can expect to occur. Because there will be damage in our systems. And think about the water system. We take water from reservoirs in the North Shore Mountains. It comes a long way through metro pipes. It has to cross under Burrard Inlet in tunnels and pipes. Then we distribute it. Some of the water goes straight to reservoir up in Queen Elizabeth Park. There's just so many places along the way that damage can occur, and damage will occur. And what I would expect in a major earthquake actually is that some of the pipe that connects us with the reservoirs on the North Shore will break. So we'll have limited access to water from those reservoirs. Metro has done a lot of work to harden the system and to provide an alternate means of supply, but nevertheless, the supply will be limited. I would expect breaks throughout our system. And so job one for us is to find out where those breaks are, limit the amount of water loss, keep as much water in the reservoirs and in the city as we possibly can, because remember, it's not just about drinking water. This is firefighting, and an earthquake with breakage in Fortis's system, you have to deal with fires. So some of the actions that we've taken, we have a very comprehensive emergency response plan for our water utility, because for us that is the priority. It's all hands on deck to isolate breaks, find out where breaks occur, close valves, save water. We have, many years ago, Council supported constructing a dedicated fire protection system, which is fairly unique in North America. San Francisco built an early system, which has been a great advantage to them in the earthquakes that they have experienced. We've built a system that can supply water independently from False Creek and from Coal Harbour, pump salt water into the system at high pressure. That system protects the downtown and Fairview slopes, which are areas which are high risk in terms of fire and life safety. So that's another way that we can provide an alternate means of fighting fires. We've built a number of well systems in partnership with Park Board as another way to provide water. Typically at Langara, and a lot of people don't realize this, but there's a very large aquifer that runs under the Langara Oak Ridge area. So we built a well system in Langara Golf Course, which normally provides irrigation for the golf course, so reduces water consumption. But the primary purpose of building that was to provide an alternate source of water in the event that the main system is not functioning correctly. Oak Ridge also uses water for cooling from that aquifer, so part of our plan is to use water from Oak Ridge Center as well. And one of the interesting things that we're doing as we speak is installing some pipe that is commonly used in Japan, but is not used at all in North America. And we became aware of this after our visit to Christchurch and the earthquake that occurred there. Started looking for alternate ways to provide more resilience in our water system. The way water systems are built is that, they're segments of pipe with a bell at one end and a smaller piece at the other end, and those pieces fit together in segments. And you want to have some flexibility in an earthquake. You don't want your utilities to be so, rigid that they'll fracture. So the flexibility is good, but the types of systems used in North America will pull apart very quickly. The difference with the Japanese system is the bell is much longer, as you can see in this cutaway photo, so it provides a lot more ability for the pipe to flex. So we're installing some, as I say, right now on Jackson Street, not so much as a pilot, because obviously it works. It's functioned well in Japan in earthquakes, but it's because the Japanese pipe doesn't fit with our pipe that well, so we're experimenting how to make that work, finding out what it actually costs to install it. And our hope is that we'll be able to interest a North American pipe manufacturer to start producing this pipe, which we would then install as a standard throughout most of our system. So over time, as we replace aging pipe, the system will become much more resilient. Now the sewer system, the mode of failure is different, but still a concern. If you imagine the sewer system, most of the time the large pipes that we have don't have that much water in them because they're sized for large storm events. And consequently, they're very buoyant. So where you have pipes in an area prone to liquefaction, they'll actually pop right out of the ground in some cases. And in Christchurch, they saw that with vaults and pump stations that actually floated up. With a water system, you can stand some differences or some movement in the pipe because it's a pressure system. The sewer system is almost entirely a gravity system. So when it gets out of alignment, it's just not going to work. And so there will be areas in the city, there will be areas in the city, as in Christchurch. What this slide shows is the degree to which they had to deploy portable toilets in Christchurch because the system wasn't working. And we have some similarities in Vancouver with areas that could liquefy. We can expect this to happen, that the sewer system in some areas will not be functional after an earthquake. So we have to develop plans for deployment of portable toilets and other strategies such as that. Other actions that we're taking, replacing sewer pump stations in our system with newer pump stations. When we do that, they're built to current seismic standards, which is significantly improved over what our current stations are. Appropriate backup power is installed, which is not necessarily the case in all of our older stations. We put flexible coupling pipes at where the pipes come into stations and vaults, because that's a place where movement of the station, the pipe can fracture, break, and the system won't function. So if you put flexible couplings in there, again, you can provide some resilience that otherwise wouldn't be available. And in both the water system and the sewer system, we have a fairly sophisticated monitoring system so that we can identify where breaks have occurred, whether we can identify how our sewer pump stations are operating without having to go to the site. Transportation systems. There we go. Mr. Johnson referred to some of the damage that will occur potentially to transportation systems in a very large earthquake. It's quite possible that there will be damage to some of our bridges, that there will be damage to the transit system, that those systems won't be operating. In some parts of the city, such as Gastown, parts of Strathcona, there will be building damage that blocks roads. So it's important for us to develop plans to move people in the event of a major earthquake. So one of the things that we've done is developed a response plan for our bridges to make sure that as a priority we get out there, survey bridges for damage so that we can decide whether they need to be closed or whether they're safe. We've done a lot of work over the past 20 years to upgrade bridges, in particular the Granville Bridge and the Burrard Bridge. It doesn't bring them entirely up to current seismic standards, but what we try to achieve is a situation where in a major earthquake they won't collapse. They'll be available to some degree for emergency responders to move pedestrians across bridges, and ultimately creates a situation where you can restore the bridge to service afterwards much more quickly than you could if spans actually collapsed. Now, one of the things Mr. Johnson referred to was an evacuation plan for the downtown. We're pulling that together. It's nearly complete, but the point of it really is to recognize those areas of the city which likely will be blocked with debris. Gastown area is an example. Recognize the areas that are at risk because of liquefaction, and to identify in advance routes that will be available if the bridges aren't available, and to have the communications put together that we can put out immediately as required to make sure that people know where they need to go to put up barricades and signs to direct people out of the downtown. And the expectation would be that in the event of a major earthquake, a lot of the movement out of the downtown would need to be by foot, and we would want to prevent people from coming back in either by foot or by car. And so this plan addresses that. It also addresses, by the way, the use of marine routes to evacuate people from the downtown by identifying some of the wharves that are available to be used, and we'll be connecting with the various marine operators to ensure that they're partners in this. You know that in the last couple of years we've been doing a lot of work on Burrard and Granville Bridge to replace some of the bearings. On the Granville Bridge in particular, this is one of the recent things that we've done, that the bearings needed to be replaced anyway, but in doing so we replaced them with a type of bearing that provides a lot more resilience for that bridge in an earthquake. So a lot of work has gone on. A lot of work will continue to go on in the current capital plan. All of the funding that we spend on water and on sewer in some ways is contributing to create more resilience in our system. So thank you. Civic buildings.
Thanks, Peter. So Bill Ajala here is here with our facilities groups, our general manager. He can answer questions. I'll just give you a quick high level. He's been undertaking a review of the seismic condition of city facilities and developed criteria on which we prioritize based on, is it required for first response? Is it required as a shelter in case of a major earthquake? And so they're creating this prioritization of which buildings we want to assess, and so they're doing just a tremendous amount of work in that area. So that is ongoing this year. And then as a part of that, the East Wing is going to be deconstructed in 2015, as you know, so that was one of the first buildings that we assessed as a part of this process. And so that work is going to be ongoing, and you'll continue to hear more about it as we get the results of those assessments. And the East Wing is currently vacant, as you know, so we're using it actually as an opportunity. You might see as you come and go, members of our fire team coming in and out, and so they're actually using it right now with police and our urban search and rescue team as an exercise site. So if you see people rappelling down the side of the building or anything, you don't need to worry. They're testing their systems. So that's a great opportunity for them to continue to improve our own readiness in the response part of our work. So more work to do over the next few years on the civic facility side of it, but that's begun, which is really important. On the emergency communications or the information plan, Rena's here, and over the last year she's done just a great job pulling the team together, looking at emergency information plans that other cities have, and updating those. Again, as we went to Christchurch, what we learned is that you really need multiple channels to get the word out. A lot of people won't have access to their computers or smartphones in the event of a major event. Earthquake, so simple signage like this that gets it out and gets it everywhere that people might be. And then, of course, the websites and the online channels as well. So we've been assessing what other cities have and certainly learning from what we saw in Christchurch to develop our own plan. And Rena did just a great job pulling in many of the media outlets in the city to work with them and get their feedback, and out of that built what is a robust emergency information plan that includes all of those different channels. Social media plan included. Of course, that's how the first line will get out, and so we've got draft press releases, draft tweets, all of that is now draft and ready to go at the EOC that we can tweak it at the time. So if it happens at 2 in the morning and we're all bleary-eyed and we're trying to figure out what the message is, that's all pre-drafted and we can tweak it at the time before we get it out there. So that kind of content being ready is really important. And then also, of course, our website, recognizing that our website may go down, and so we've built a backup website that has all the emergency messaging that fires up automatically and is automatically triggered with a certain magnitude earthquake. So that content has been developed as well. So a lot of work on that side of it, but then also thinking about and talking to the media, where would they want to be briefed, what kind of hardware do they need on site, how many might we expect, and so developing plans for large tents and malt boxes and power, all that kind of stuff, so that we can be ready to go right away, including the field equipment that we might need. And so we've purchased that and it's on site, ready to go. So that kind of, those pieces, so we're ready with a solid communications plan. And the emergency information, also engaging with Fortis and Hydro and all the communicators from those various departments or partner organizations. So Rena and her team have done a good job really moving us forward quite far on this, in our readiness in this regard. So that's the information plan. Of course, having all these plans is great, but we need to continue to train and exercise the plans. Now that we have them developed, we've been gearing up with more exercising and training, and as you know, Council, we want to continue to involve you in that process and clearly communicate your role, so you have clarity on that. So we're updating. You remember the little red booklets that we gave to each of you? I've got some more today if anybody needs them, but we're in the process of updating that based on now having some of these additional plans in place. So I'll hand out additional booklets if you need them, but we'll be getting you new ones in the upcoming months here so that you're really clear on what the expectations are of you in the event of an event like this. And then we're going to be doing more to engage the whole organization from council, mayor and council to CMT, and then all the way throughout the organization to those first responders, be they arborists or fire and police staff. So you'll be hearing and seeing more of that in this year and in the upcoming years as we now have the plans, we get to exercise them. One very important part of that, as you saw in the video, a lot of the buildings will be impacted, and it's really, really important that they get an assessment right away, because people aren't clear. Are they allowed to go into their home or not? Are they allowed to go into a building or not? And that would impact business continuity. And also, the amount of people that we would need to shelter if they can't get in to assess a building that maybe the building's fine, but it's got some visible cracks, and so we need to assess it before people go back in. That needs to happen very quickly. So Pat Ryan, our chief building official, has been working with his staff and training. We've trained over 100 city staff in the rapid damage assessment, so we can go out and very quickly do that process. And then, of course, working with private sector engineers and architects to engage them right away. So we have a whole team of people that would be going across the city to do that work. And so we're a lot of training going on back and forth with professionals in the community and with our own staff. And then, of course, aligning with Emergency Management BC so that we're engaging with the province and other municipalities in the region as well. So that training is very, very important, both the assessment on the bridge side, as Peter was saying, but then also on the facilities side and the building side. So volunteers and community support, as was mentioned, we see a lot of interest from the community to come out. We certainly saw it in Christchurch. The Farmy Army came out, people with tractors and all sorts of interesting implements to help clear the roads, and then more structured teams like our Vancouver Volunteer Corps. And so a lot of people want to come out and help, and we need to make sure that we have the structures in place to get those spontaneous volunteers engaged and involved in the response effort. So it was out of the lessons from Christchurch that you directed us, Council, to develop the Vancouver Volunteer Corps. And so we have certainly been growing that team, and Fire's been leading the effort on what we've been calling NEAT, which is the Neighborhood Emergency Assistance Team. So the Vancouver Volunteer Corps, we've got about 900 now that have been trained since 2012, and we have it, that's the entry level, but then the NEAT is one level deeper. And they're the folks that would be working directly with the Vancouver Fire Rescue in the event of an emergency like this. And then, of course, the ESS, Emergency Social Services, those are the folks that go out middle of the night, our volunteers at a fire or other event to help displaced people. So that's been growing, and we certainly encourage more volunteers to sign up. They can call 311. We have constant intake and training opportunities for them, and then we do exercises like the photo that you see above, where we actually engage the volunteers in the training opportunities, working with the HUSAR team and Vancouver Fire and Rescue and our partners. So we're ongoing implementation for VVC, and Council would really encourage you, if you're out and about and talking to people about these issues, encourage them to consider joining the Vancouver Volunteer Corps. We're continuing to grow that team and really feel like it's a critical part of a response. What we saw, and just even in the Calgary floods, after the flood, the mayor said, hey, we need volunteers to come out, and they got many, 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 many more than they were expecting. If we have Vancouver Volunteer Corps members, they're actually trained in helping those spontaneous volunteers that show up and helping them to get plugged in and involved so that we don't need to take our staff away from their day-to-day responsibilities in that event. So they can really help with the spontaneous volunteers as well. And as we learned in Christchurch and other places, the people that are displaced are looking for information. If the standard method of getting information out aren't working, you saw those signs in Christchurch, they actually created these posts. And so we're in the process of developing one of the recommendations from the strategy is a community disaster support hubs. And so we're developing these now. And those will be located throughout the community. And it's a very low-tech way to facilitate grassroots community support and to link community response with the city response. And so people can gather at these posts and get information, tell people, hey, I saw that there was a building that was damaged over there, or what's going on with the water in our community, and it's a place that we can put posters up in the event the communication systems aren't working. So that's you'll be seeing that come out in 2015 here as we're finalizing our signs and the final plan here. But our general sense, what we've seen in other places, that those would be in pre-identified locations at or near the reception centers where we might be taking people in if they need a place to stay. And then as we've talked about multiple occasions, really aligning regionally is very important as well. And so our staff have been involved in regional collaboration. So we're working with IPREM, the Integrated Partnership for Regional Emergency Management, and that's in partnership with Metro, as you know, and the province. And so we're developing a regional concept of operations. And that basically is what's the process by which the city managers talk to each other right after an event and agree on the allocation of resources. For instance, if there's a shortage of fuel or other municipalities are asking us for assistance or for help in some way or other, for instance, the HUSAR team or COTS, or we're asking another municipality for support, that would all happen through this structure that's being developed. So that's been a lot of work, and I think will provide some support to us to work as the lower mainland here. Then we're also working with the province. As you know, they were doing consultation to update their plans. When we brought our plan forward to you, Council, you asked us a good number of questions about the province and their readiness, and we didn't have answers to many of those questions. And so the AG report that came out gave clear direction to them to do more work on this, and so we've been engaging with them as they've been doing their consultation. And then reviewing the BC Emergency Response Management System. So that's BCERMS, as you may recall. That's got kind of the hierarchy of how response happens in the province, and that's under review, and so we're feeding into that as well. So really encouraged, actually, to see that there's more work happening regionally and provincially now. And each of those meetings that we go into, generally, they actually have a copy of our strategy and are referring to it, and so it's become a bit of a model, I think, for others in the lower mainland and in the province around how to do a plan like this. So we're really proud of the work that our staff have done in improving our own readiness. So Council, thanks for your patience. In summary, we really are taking this seriously across our whole organization, as you can see by the teams that are here. And it's ongoing work. We try to integrate it into our day-to-day work, as Peter was saying, with if we're doing a pump station, make sure that it's got flexible joints, make sure it's got the backup power. So Not all of this is additional work. A lot of this is just a lens by which we can look at our day-to-day work if we're redoing streets or if we're doing work in an area that might be prone to liquefaction. What are some of the strategies we can integrate into that work? And we definitely are working more with our partners regionally and provincially, and we're constantly updating our kind of work plans as we learn new things. And so the plan is the strategy is not in any way static. We're continuing to evolve it as we learn from other places. And in 2015, we're going to be engaging with our partners and rolling out some of the new initiatives that I mentioned today, continuing to train and exercise, and would really encourage your participation in the activities. So with that said, Mr. Mayor and Council, happy to answer questions or direct questions to other staff that are here to address any of the concerns or questions you may have. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mr. Johnson, for an excellent presentation and overview update of our earthquake preparedness work, and huge thanks to the staff team. This has been a big priority for, well, these past 6 years anyway, making sure that we're doing everything we can to prepare for worst case scenario, and it's really impressive to see the scope of the work. It's Madam City Manager and our Deputy City Manager have taken this very seriously and made sure that all the departments and then the outreach around the region with the province and globally to make sure that we know best practices here and know what we can do with them on the ground. So big kudos for all your work on this. It's been great to see, and obviously it's still work in progress. I'll just start with a couple quick questions on the in terms of the regional concept, maybe starting where you left off. What's the timing of development of the regional concept and the work that's being done there to have a coordinated approach around the region?
Mr. Mayor and Council, that work is ongoing as well, and we now have a draft of what that would look like. Who triggers a call? What's the agenda? What's the topics? They've actually recreated the guides that I mentioned, the red books. They've now recreated those for Metro directors, and we'll be rolling them out. And so we've definitely been sharing our experiences with them. The general concept as it is now solid. We've exercised it a couple times, and we'll be taking it to the city managers in the region within the next couple months, and then rolling it out and probably tweaking it based on those experiences. So we'll be having a chance to continue to test it in 2015. But we now have a solid draft and some clarity in understanding what are the types of issues we would address as the Lower Mainland versus what then goes up to the province. Mm-hmm. And what's the process by which we would ask for assistance from each other, so that we don't get 20 calls from different municipalities. It's all channeled through one dialogue, and so that's the kind of work we've been doing, and it'll be rolling out within the year.
As this over the months to come.
Yeah, it's definitely we're already testing it, as I said, and so each of us as municipalities will get a chance to continue to test it over the months to come. Yeah.
And on the BC front, the BC ERMS work, is that what stage are they at in their process of updating and?
From what I can tell, there's some kind of alignment that they're looking to with the consultation that they did and the recommendations that they'll bring forward on the provincial earthquake plan. So I'm not sure exactly the timing of those two and when they'll come forward. We've been, as much as we can, participating in their dialogues and sharing information, sharing our plans, and putting forward kind of recommendations of what we would need from them. So I'm not actually sure kind of we've given our feedback, and now it's kind of in a little bit of a black box as they do their work. So we're looking forward to hearing what their recommendations are.
Okay. Well, hopefully that's progressing quickly, and
yeah,
and we have a coordinated approach across the region and beyond.
Yep.
Just a quick question on the volunteer front. It's great to hear the volunteer corps is 900 plus. How many of those volunteers are trained? How many are in the NEAT, in those teams?
Maybe I'll ask our partners from fire to over 200 are trained in the NEAT specifically.
Okay.
Of the 900, and I think about 300 are in the ESS. Is that about 350 in the ESS track?
Oh, excellent.
So now what we now have is the basic level of training is required for any track. so that the 900 are trained in the basic, and then they can splinter off if they have deeper interest in going into vector. So that's the radio communications group, or ESS. Or
Emergency Support Services, ESS.
ESS, yeah, thanks.
Who saved the day on many occasions. Good to have that many people involved in that. My next question is on the tabletop exercise. You mentioned tabletop exercises this year. It sounds like taking it to the next level in terms of a mock earthquake and how we will do. Should we be expecting to have that booked out in our calendars in the near term?
Should be expecting it, but it won't be in your calendars.
Okay.
I'm just kidding. No, we're planning to do something probably around shakeout, so we can align with the activities happening in kind of globally and in the rest of the province.
Okay.
Yep.
And my final question is on the water front. Probably Mr. Judd can best answer. If we lose the water from the North Shore, the metro water, and we're running off of the Oak Ridge aquifer, how long can we last? How much water can we produce from that aquifer and pump around the city? And is all the infrastructure there to basically flip a switch and use water from our wells?
Well, it wouldn't get you very far. And the intent is more to use as a source of water to potentially treat for potable water versus for firefighting use, as an example. So you would treat it on site and truck it to where you needed it from there, or use a tanker to get it to a hospital, for example, which would be is a high priority for us to serve.
So there's nowhere near the volume to basically pump through the system, presuming there's an intact system within the city.
No, there's not. And remember that Metro built a relatively recently pipe from the Coquitlam Reservoir that doesn't go under the inlet, and so the expectation is that that's much more likely to survive than supply from Seymour or Capilano. So I would expect we would have some supply from there, but we would be competing with the rest of the region for that, of course. Right. So no, it really is a matter of isolating the system, expecting that residents for a period of time will need to supply their own water. And that's one of the points that we make in the training, is you need to be storing some water in your house in a place where you can get at it if there's damage to your house, because it's very likely that we will not be able to supply potable water to individual homes for some time following an earthquake.
Okay.
To build off that, you may recall we've briefed you a couple times, and you approved the purchase of 2 fireboats. One of the nice things about those boats is they've drastically increased the pumping capacity, as you know. So they could actually go to an area along the inlet and False Creek or on the Fraser and be stationed there and be pumping water on land. And so that might serve us as well if there are areas where we have fires that we don't have enough pressure that are outside the DFPS area as well. So that's another tool in our arsenal for bringing water if we need it.
Thank you. That's my time for questions. Councillor Carr is next up.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for all the work. I mean, I think that we all have to realize this is preparation we need to do. I know that the last major earthquake actually was around 1700, and it was magnitude 9 on the Richter scale, and that the science of geography is predicting about 350 years because there was one earlier in the 1300s. So we have to be prepared, and so I hope that people understand the money put into that preparation is very, very well spent money. And I am a little worried about the fact that our emergency people are training on a seismically unsafe building. So I hope they are taking that into consideration in terms of the East Wing. And that does bring me to a question around buildings. How have we been working with the building code to ensure the building code is ensuring all that the new buildings being built are to a standard that is as high as we can feasibly expect, especially the thickness of walls, glass, all those kinds of things?
And Pat's here. I mean, maybe I'll take a crack at that, and you can jump in, Pat, if you want to add to it. We do have one of the most robust building codes in the country for seismic requirements, and we're one of the first to bring in requirements for retrofits as well. So if you've got an existing building that's coming in and they're doing a retrofit, we require seismic upgrading as a part of that. So I think we're pretty well off. I think from the building front, our greater concern is those buildings that were built before the requirements came in. So the buildings that are 1970s and earlier would be the ones that we'd be concerned about, and particularly the unreinforced masonry buildings that you might see in Strathcona and Gastown, Yaletown, some of those areas. So I think we're constantly, as we bring in new updates to the building code, updating the requirements for seismic as well, and then many of those get replicated in the province as well. But I think where we want to bring in a group of advisors and experts in the field is to help us think about those pre-seismic requirement buildings. And looking at, we had a speaker come in from San Francisco recently, and they have actually required upgrades for certain most vulnerable building types, what's called the soft first story buildings that would collapse, kind of pancake down. And so they actually had a program where they required upgrades for that building type. Given that was the highest risk for them. And so we kind of think what we want to be thinking about is what are the buildings that we're most concerned about, and what are some of the things we could be doing over multiple decades to start to get those fixed up. Anything to add, Pat? Or? Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Good. I look forward to that discussion continuing when we get the next version of the building code.
Great. Yes, thank you.
In terms of the assessment of our buildings, have we thoroughly assessed not only buildings like this, the City Hall, but also all our fire stations, our community centers, which are places where people are going to go to, the neighborhood houses, the childcare centers that are owned by us. I know schools have been done, but have we done that assessment for all of our civic buildings?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor and Council, that was, Mr. Chair, that was one of the points I was trying to make in that slide, is that that's a process that we are undertaking right now.
Not completed yet.
It's not complete yet, and Bill Aguilar, General Manager for Real Estate and Facilities, can add to that, but that's work that we're undergoing right now. And of course, as I mentioned, the criteria by which we're prioritizing that is buildings that are required for first response or that would be sheltering our residents or playing a support role in the event of an emergency. And in certain cases, just if a building that we had been planning to be a shelter is not in great shape, move the shelter. Don't necessarily upgrade every single building, but really understand what's the condition of those buildings. And so that's the work we're underdoing right now. Anything to add, Bill?
Mr. Aguilar? Mr. Chair, Council, the only thing I would add is that when we talk about all this work happening right now, when you look at buildings, there's really two areas of focus. One is the non-structural upgrades, and in the capital plan, there's actually almost $2 million, and as the capital budgets are approved, that work is happening. And then there's the big ticket items, which is the structural collapse, the structural upgrades of the building. And that's where, because it is a lot of money, we want to make sure that we allocate our resources in an optimal manner to get the best outcome. And that's where these studies are happening. So we are assessing all of our buildings, first of all, and what's happening as part of those studies, we look at a number of factors, and this is based on advice from experts in the field. And as Mr. Johnson said, we look at what kind of use these buildings will be put to, occupancy. So taking all those factors into consideration, essentially they're being assessed. So because you can't spend all the money on doing just studies for one building, the way we've been advised is you do a high-level study on all the buildings. That filters out the buildings that are at risk of collapse. From there, you do the next level of studies, which are more expensive. And that's the work that's happening right now. And that's bringing to light certain fire halls that we're actually doing an in-depth review on. And we'll continue to get plans together, and through the capital work and the capital budgets, we'll be seeking funding to actually upgrade those buildings.
Okay. Councillor Carr, that's your time. Thank you. Thanks. Councillor Stevenson.
Thank you very much, and thank you also for that report. That was a scary video. And I think that's the type of thing that's really going to be necessary to help people realize the problem that we potentially face, or we will face at some time. And my experience so far is not a lot of people really are picking up on this. They kind of well, we've lived so long hearing that there's a possibility and nothing has ever happened. So I'm wondering how you're getting that out and around as an educational tool, and whether it's possible to have it on YouTube and Facebook so that we can send it off to everybody we know and so on.
Thank you, Councillor. So we have it on Facebook. We have it on YouTube now, and be happy to send the link around to Council, and it would be just great to have you push it out to your networks. The more people we can get to see the video, the better. And we're now focused on partnering with the business community to get the message out through their networks and to ensure that they have continuity plans. And Kirsten is here, started within the last year to work on the business outreach piece of this and helping them with continuity planning and whatnot. So it's really what people do in their own homes, but also businesses, because the chances are we could be at work when this happens. And the difference between a business being able to continue to operate after an event like this is to have their data backed up. So would certainly appreciate, Council, you're helping to get the word out, and we'll send the link to the video out as well.
Okay, 2 or 3 other questions. Mr. Judd, you raised the issue of these pipes from Japan. Why is it that the Japanese are so far ahead of us, and why is North America not already undertaking these? It seems pretty logical from what you say, and is it?
The cost factor isn't that high. I mean, clearly experiencing in an ongoing way the impacts of earthquakes, so they're ahead on those things. And if most of North America is not nearly as susceptible as we are, San Francisco or Coast is. So there hasn't been the same impetus here to develop that pipe, but our hope is that we will be able to and get it manufactured here, because installing it throughout our system will provide a much greater degree of resilience.
Just thinking about the North Shore and the Landscape Bridge, I don't know if this was asked last time, I don't remember, but what would be the Richter scale point where that bridge would be in real trouble, and how secure is it?
Sorry, I'm afraid I don't have that information, and interestingly, in the media you hear about Richter scale, and engineers will almost never give you a Richter scale rating, because it's more about the ground acceleration, which varies hugely depending on the geography. And so I don't have that information. I can get the information for you.
So that bridge, I think, would be fairly vulnerable.
I don't want to hazard a guess. I mean, that type of bridge is it's a very flexible kind of structure. So the nature of the structure is one that would be more resilient, but the specifics on that one I don't know.
To build off of that, we can expect, no matter what, that it'll be closed for some period of time, even if it's in fine shape, to be tested. And so, we need to understand that it may take a few hours, a day, for them to bring in the engineers they need to assess the bridge. And so we do need to be planning for the fact that some people likely won't be able to get across it, even if it's in fine shape, for some period of time.
That raises another interesting point about the city itself in comparison to the North Shore. Are we more vulnerable with our location, them being on a mountain, as far as the actual earthquake and the potential damage, and also, of course, that's where the water is, so they could be far better off with.
Well, I think, Council, that there's several factors and different conditions. So you might see more mudslides happening in that area, but you probably won't see as much liquefaction. So I think there's different factors, and it partly would depend on where the earthquake was and what was closest to the epicenter. So yeah, it's hard to say. They're definitely they're undertaking actions as well and ensuring their own preparedness, and we do engage with them kind of in their planning as well.
There's no plans to evacuate people over to the other side when you're evacuating people out of Vancouver. It's the other way, isn't it?
Well, assuming that we can get across the tracks to the C-bus, we would hope that the C-bus would be running. That's part of what we're looking at in our evacuation plans and the level of readiness that they would have, that pedestrian bridge. But we would definitely be trying to get people home, and with the potential that the bridges might not be available immediately, going across the water is definitely a good option. And so we'd be looking at using that piece of that asset. But then what we've seen in other events is that other people that have boats end up ferrying people across. And so we want to establish protocols for just everyone that's able to, being able to help get people back home largely to the North Shore that may be downtown in that type of event.
Okay, thank you,
So
Councillor
marine response as a part of our evacuation plan is definitely a key part.
I was going to say finally, but I just got...
You are well over time. Thank you, Councillor Stevenson. I'll take my place in the queue. Thanks for the comprehensive update. I do concur with Councillor Stevenson that a scary video, it's great to scare ourselves sometimes and motivate some action perhaps. But I'm wondering what the level of uptake there's been to all that we've done so far. Like, what's the penetration and knowledge base of our citizens, and can we measure that? And then next year when you come back to us again, give us an update of how well we've been doing on getting into households and having them take action.
That's a really interesting question, and I think we are constantly offering workshops and the activities that we offer. The uptake for those has been almost exponential. It's just a ton of interest, but what we always see is there's a spike after an earthquake somewhere around the globe, and maintaining that level of interest after those events is tough. And so as a part of our educational efforts, we are engaging in surveys to understand what's the level of understanding and what's the level of activity, and how can we change that. Anecdotally at this point, it's relatively low, the amount that people I think people know something, in the back of their mind that there's a concern, but the number of people that might go to the website to view the video or develop their own plans remains relatively low, and that's one of our, now that we have a strategy, one of our intentions is to continue to push that message out there.
So the second part of my question is related. It goes to, notwithstanding what Mr. Judd said, our infrastructure is in pretty good shape in comparison to other North American cities. But what's our risk profile, I think, is important to determine the level of activity that we take to get us to a level of state of readiness, an acceptable state of readiness. And I don't have a sense of that. We've got a number of activities. We're in progress for 70% and completed 12%. That's great. There's an 18% that's missing in there that I'm not sure what was on that list. Can't remember from a year ago what that longer list was. But in the context of our operating budget and our capital budget that we're approving of this, in the coming months, are there additional activities that we should be directing funds towards in order to get us into that actual state of readiness? And I don't have that information as part of this update.
Okay, thanks. That's a good line of questioning. I think the work that Bill was talking about on the facilities side, getting that information will be really helpful for us. As we brought our plan forward last year, we recognized that we didn't know our own state of readiness in our facilities, which is why we've been doing that work. And as you know, if a truck can't get out of a fire hall because the building's fallen down over it, or one of our facilities that we're planning on using as a shelter isn't standing, that would drastically impact our own state of readiness. So the work that we're doing in the facility side of this is critical for us to really know that. And until that work is done, I don't think we're going to have a full picture of that. I do think that each of the parts of our organization are integrating the work in, and there is not a ask on the capital or operating side that we haven't fulfilled. It is being integrated into our day-to-day work, and you'll see us come forward as we get the information from our facilities assessment with recommendations for investments that we could make.
Maybe next year, as part of the next update, a little more data in terms of the metrics of the activities that we're undertaking and the results of those
absolutely
of those activities. You know, some of them are already embedded in here. It's great to see 67% of the bases are isolated on the Granville Street Bridge. You know, those types of activities and results that are in this slide. I did want to ask about that 18% that's not underway. What are those?
I can't run the list through. I'm happy to get you the full list, and they are in the strategy that we presented last year, and I can report back if that would be helpful to you. Many of the recommendations would cascade down. So, for instance, as Mr. Aujala was saying, we're doing the assessments of those facilities now, and then that would trigger other actions that are in the plan once we know what they are. For instance, upgrading facilities. So for the most part, we're moving forward with the actions that we feel we're ready to pursue at this point. There aren't actions that we're sitting on, for instance, or there's not inactivity. What we did is, as we brought forward the plan to you, what we prioritized based on our assessment of the risk, the top 12, and those are the ones that we committed to pursuing right away. Some of the other actions, for instance, engaging the business community would be one where we brought in a new staff person to do it. We're developing a program, but we haven't gone out yet to roll it out, and so that would be an action that hasn't started yet. Example.
Lastly, Mr. Mayor, just on the, well, it's a two-parter. One is we're working with other partners, and there's an org structure chart that you put up. It didn't mention schools in that list, and maybe an update on what's happening with HUSAR.
Okay. Firstly, on the schools, we've definitely been engaging with them, and on a number of levels. How would we communicate with them? Simple things. Do they have a sat phone in their operations center? What's the phone number? How do we exchange that information right after an earthquake? And so tightening up those processes. And then, of course, understanding which facilities they've upgraded, how would they be used, how might we use them. If they're not sheltering students in place, can we use them as a community asset? So that type of dialogue is certainly taking place. And then they've done a lot of work in upgrading their own facilities, and they've developed processes that we can learn from. And so we're engaging with them around their seismic upgrades to influence and learn from for our facility upgrade work. So that's been a good engagement. I think they've got more work to do, certainly in their own facilities, as we know. And then on the HUSAR side of things, is you're very familiar with, Council, the federal funding dried up, which has been a frustration for us. We have partnered more closely with the province, and they've been helping us to fill the gap. We still see a gap, though, and so we're working with our partners, the other HUSAR teams across the country, to continue to push the federal government to reinstate some of that funding. At this point, the team is strong. We are continuing to maintain that basic level of operations as we talked about last time, and continuing to train and ensure that we have a full complement. But you know, over the years, it will become more of a burden. So we really need the federal government to step in with some of those resources again.
Thank you.
So thanks for your comments, and I really appreciate the points on the metrics. And so as we develop a more robust tracking for our actions, we'll be able to report on that. So thanks for those points.
Thanks, Councillor Louis. Councillor DiGenova.
Mayor, thank you so much to our staff for this very informative presentation. I have to say, yesterday I was fortunate to have one of my council tours with Vancouver Fire, and thank you to the Deputy Chief and the Assistant Chief. I slept much better last night knowing that we're prepared and seeing some of the measures and steps that Vancouver Fire has taken, so very impressed with that. Just a few questions, especially on the communication side, and I understand And thank you very much for the question, Councillor Carr. What are we doing with our community centres and our schools? I'm just wondering, when we finally have implemented this plan, are we looking to make sure that every resident in the city of Vancouver knows where they should be attending? So for instance, if we're looking sort of at our community centres, an example would be Hastings Community Centre, probably one of our most seismically unstable community centres. Would we be looking in that neighborhood to tell people you probably won't be able to go here, you should go here instead? Are we going to be sort of making sure that that information is out there so people know where they should be going right away?
That's a very interesting question. First step on that is making sure, as I've already said, that places that we would plan on using as reception centers are facilities that we expect would be standing and that would be in good shape, be able to access them. Simple things like trees that might be falling or entrances, for instance. So that facility work that Mr. Aujala mentioned is important for that. What we really encourage residents to do is to have a family reunification plan. Where will you meet your family? And ideally it's in an open area, so in a field or somewhere that you're not going to have structures that would obstruct it. Our plan is to have facilities ready in each of the neighborhoods, but we don't tell families or people to go to particular places until we know what condition they're in. So it's a kind of a dual plan where we want to make sure families have a reunification plan. Where are you going to go to meet your family or your kids? And if they can't go back to their home, we would have those support hubs that I mentioned, and those would be on signs in an open area, so they wouldn't be impacted by a building collapsing and not being able to access that information. We'll be able to then communicate, if you need support, here are the facilities or the places you can go in your neighborhood. We don't want to tell everyone, go to that facility, because it may not be accessible at the time, and so it's the kind of information we want to do as much as we can beforehand to make sure the facilities are ready, and then assess them and direct people to them once we know that they are indeed ready.
Okay, and then I just have a few other questions. I also had the opportunity to tour through the dedicated fire protection system, and I understand the logic behind that in making sure that the areas with the most densification in Vancouver are considered first. However, as we continue to densify through our other neighborhoods, I'm wondering, is there any plans to expand that fire protection system?
Mr. Judd?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It certainly can be expanded, and in the initial design of the system, we also looked at the potential to provide protection further east in the city. At that time, as you point out, the most important areas to protect were the downtown and Fairview slopes. Fairview slopes, because of the nature of the construction and the wood frame construction, and fairly dense in that area. So it could be expanded. It's a very expensive system. Part of the rationale in the downtown in particular at that time too was that in order to accommodate the fire flows for growing city, we would have had to do a lot of replacement of the existing water system. So by building the dedicated system that's available anytime for fire to use on a large fire, we're able to get some economies there. So it's just something to consider in expanding the system. Are we able to forego other system replacement? What's the cost of it? How can we fit it in with our capital plan? But all of these changes for us occur over a long period of time. The water system and the sewer system have 100-year life cycles. And so a lot of what we're trying to do is time to happen in a way that coincides with the end of life of those systems, so that the marginal cost of getting the improvement is smaller.
And just one more quick question, and that is, thank you very much for the update on our volunteer corps and knowing that we have a number of people standing by and ready, but I'm also just wondering with the situation of our first responders. So all of our first responders, is there going to be an inventory of how many of those people actually reside in Vancouver, how we would bring them in if, for instance, they lived in municipalities where they couldn't get over bridges? Is that being considered, and will we receive an update on that?
Yeah. It's a great question. Many of our first responders do live outside of the city, and or may live in a part of the city where they can't get to their place of work for whatever reason. And so what we've, there's a few pieces to that. The first is developing an emergency call-out system. So a direct system that we could deploy and call staff in if needed. So updating that system. And then also what I think you might recall, we had talked about or developed disaster staging areas, which would be key places in 6 areas of the city where we have emergency response containers where our first responders would go. So if one of our responders can't get to their place of work for whatever reason, they would go there and report in and be deployed from there. And each of those containers have communications equipment and emergency assessment information, so they can go out and just start working in that immediate neighborhood. And then if they can't get into the city to their place of work, would be to check in with us and then let us know what the time is that they might be able to get in. And if not, to report to one of the neighboring municipalities' locations to be able to communicate with us. And so those are what we are doing. We're assessing who lives where, and particularly in proximity to our disaster staging areas. So arborists, for instance, we may need the arborist to actually go to their works yard to get the vehicle and to begin working, but building assessment staff might actually go straight to one of the DSAs in their community. So it's starting to do that kind of work and really understand where people are and where they should be reporting, and really clearly communicating it to our staff so they know, where do I go in the event of an earthquake, and whether they're on duty or off duty.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Deal is next up.
Thanks very much. Hard to think of a question that hasn't been asked yet, but luckily a couple of mine haven't been asked yet, although they've been asked near. One of them is around transportation and one of them is around outreach. On the transportation front, we've talked a lot about the bridges. We've talked about the challenges in getting people to and from their workplace, and as well as to a place of refuge. We talked about in the presentation you mentioned the marine options for transportation. Not knowing what will happen to Port Metro, although I assume they're as stable as they can be sitting at a port. But we also have our civic marinas. There's the Aquabus terminals. So what are we doing in terms of ensuring that there's some place that boats, should we end up using them, can get to and from people?
Yeah, so building off of the point around the C-bus, that's one, as you say, option. What we've done in our evacuation plan for downtown is mapped out each of those.
Yep.
And the level of capability that they would have, so that we have the key points, and then started to map out who might have vessels that could be utilized in that event. So that's definitely part of the concept of how we would respond.
Okay, but just for the downtown, I'm thinking also of the Fraser River. I mean, we're going to liquefaction. You want to talk liquefaction down at that end of things? There'll probably be a lot of regional impact nearby.
Yeah, absolutely.
And associated problems with sedimentation, and who knows what's going to happen with any access to the whole south half of the city there.
Yep. No, that's a great point, and that's definitely part of the analysis we need to undertake. It hasn't been completed yet.
And then second of all, we've talked about YVR before, and the fact that it is sitting on a tidal flat, and I know that they're doing everything they can to be as stable as possible. But just to review again for people what the options are, because we will probably be doing what Christchurch did, which is bringing in crews from elsewhere to help out. And the odds might be that they have to go to Seattle, or we're looking at Abbotsford.
Yep.
What do our heliports look like? One's on top of a tall building, the other one's at the port. So I'm just curious as to what those other options for air travel might be to get additional rescue crews into the region.
Well, you certainly mentioned it. As you know, we have partnerships with the heavy urban search and rescue teams in Calgary and also in Washington. And so those would likely be via ground transportation. We could expect delays in getting the airports up and running, presumably. Would we be utilizing some of the water airport facilities that we have? Certainly we'd be expecting the Calgary team would be coming in by a truck. But then the bringing in goods and whatnot, we'd be relying on some of the, if YVR isn't up and running immediately, looking at others like Abbotsford, as you said.
Okay, good, thank you. And my final question just has to do again with that outreach piece that so many of us are really keen on, and getting to the fine scale. We heard a presentation earlier this morning from City Studio about Ask Lauren, which is that sort of community interaction within a building. We've got the Snow Angels program, for instance, and I know that we can't micro sort of communicate with all of those perhaps building-related scale things, but is there something like people who organize block parties who could be sort of a default fine-scale access points to neighborhood and building organizations or groups of community, groups of citizens?
Yeah, that's certainly a challenge for us. We've got so many things we're trying to get our community partners to help us with, whether it's organics or whatnot. One of the classes that was mentioned earlier this morning the City Studio worked on was actually a gaming class, and they came up, it was an app development class, and they focused just on emergency response. And there were some amazing apps that they developed. They actually had a display, and they had a whole day down in the town hall here at City Hall, presenting some of the apps that they developed and the kind of the gamification of this and getting points for different things and treasure hunts. And so there definitely are ways that I think we can be more creative in our partnerships to get that type of thing out there. One of the student classes came up with almost an Oculus that you can look through, and it's on a stand, and you'd look through it and see what that vista might look like in the event of an earthquake. So partnering with the City Studio has been a helpful way to get new ideas out there. But I think there's more work we can do in the years ahead to get different parts of our community engaged in getting the word out so that it's not all coming from City Hall.
Well, exactly. We won't have the bandwidth to do that, but we have some sort of natural networks already and more evolving. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Reimer's next on the queue.
Deal. I sort of assumed someone else would ask this, so I was surprised it didn't come up. So the presentation and the work, you've sort of taken us from today, well, really the last year or 2 or 3, to about a couple weeks after an earthquake, and it sounds like that's very thoroughly been analyzed. I was curious in the recovery piece. I know the lessons that you brought back from Christchurch and certainly Japan, whether it's years that you'll be recovering or weeks that you'll be recovering really depends on those continuity plans. And I know this is the sexy stuff, the like fire and all this, how will we respond in the moment? But no matter how well we respond, there will need to be recovery. So could you speak a bit to where, and I know it's also the hardest part because A, it's not that sexy, and B, it's hard to imagine an earthquake, let alone the recovery period.
Yeah, what we observed in Christchurch was that recovery piece was absolutely critical to maintaining the economy of their community. So many of their businesses, from what we observed, didn't have adequate continuity plans. They couldn't continue their business. And as a result, either went out of business or left the city. And so that's one of the reasons we're trying to work with we are working with the Board of Trade to get the message out there. There are simple things that a business can do, backing up data off-site, for instance, so they can continue to work the following day, but out of a Starbucks or from another location. So business continuity planning is really very important in our own operation and our own organization. Rob's here, who's working on business continuity for our operations. But then sharing those lessons and experiences with the private sector is very, very important. And that will be the difference between a very vibrant downtown and community generally and people getting back to work or not. So we are developing some tools, as I mentioned earlier, and we'll be getting them out in the next few years to really saturate the community with the lessons, the toolkits, things that people can do in their own businesses to ensure that they have business continuity down pat.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Council, anything, as you go and tour nonprofit organizations or businesses, engage with people, even just asking them the simple question, do you have a business continuity plan? I mean, the more that we can keep that up there, I mean, many of our social supports in the community, the nonprofits that we're going to be relying on, they need continuity plans as well. Whether it's a daycare, having some bottled water under the counter, or just the simple things that they can be able to support the ongoing operation of their facility will help us to be more resilient as a community. And that recovery piece, the more we can do to bring that recovery piece, A, to start it earlier, and B, to conclude it earlier, the better our whole community will be. And there's a lot of little things we can do in our businesses now and nonprofits to help with that. So I really encourage you, Mr. Mayor and Council, that when you're out and about talking to people to ask those simple questions, it gets it back on their minds. So thanks for asking it.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Johnson, and to the whole team for your work on this front and the great presentation and responses to council's questions.
Great, thank you.
Good to see all the progress on this.
Thank you.
We'll definitely keep it fresh in our minds, ready for anything. And we are done with our report references, and we need a motion to rise from committee of the whole. Why don't we do that first? A motion to rise. Councillor Carr, seconded by Councillor Louis. All those in favor? Any opposed? And that carries. A motion to extend the meeting. We're at noon. Motion to extend to complete the business on the agenda. Moved by Councillor Deal, seconder. Councillor Jang, all those in favor? Any opposed? And that carries. We need a motion to adopt the report of the Committee of the Whole. Councillor Deal, a seconder. Councillor Carr, all those in favor? Any opposed? And that carries. Next up is bylaws. We have 4 bylaws on the agenda for consideration by council. And I'll ask if any member wishes to hold any of the bylaws for debate, separate vote, or because of a conflict of interest. Seeing none on that, I will check with some of the council here with regards to bylaws 2 and 4. We had council members not in attendance at the relevant meetings, or who have not subsequently advised that they have reviewed the related proceedings. They may only vote on those bylaws if they confirm they reviewed the portion of the proceedings which they missed, which includes viewing the video clips on the city's website. Bylaw number 2 is a public hearing enactment bylaw from a hearing held February the 18th, 2014, with the decision made at regular council on March the 11th, 2014. And Councillors Jang and Stevenson were not present at that regular council meeting. However, on February 3rd, they advised they had reviewed the proceedings. They are therefore eligible to now vote on this bylaw. Councillor DeGenova, you were not on council at that time. Have you reviewed the proceedings of that public hearing and the regular council meeting where the decision was made, and will you be voting on the enactment of this bylaw?
No, as I was not on council, I will not be voting.
Okay, thank you for that. And bylaw 4 is a public hearing enactment bylaw from a hearing held March the 13th, 2014. Councillors Jang, Reimer, Stevenson were absent from the hearing, and Councillor DeGenova was not on council. When I call your names, please advise whether you've reviewed the proceedings of the hearing and if you will be voting on bylaw 4. Councillor DeGenova?
No, I was not on council.
Okay. Councillor Jang?
Yes, I have reviewed and I will be voting.
Okay. Councillor Reimer?
Yes, I reviewed and I will be voting.
Thank you. And Councillor Stevenson?
Yes, yes.
Yes is there as well. Okay. So with all of that clear now, we need someone to move adoption of bylaws 1 to 4. Councillor Stevenson, Councillor Meggs will second. All those in favor? Any opposed? And that carries unanimously. So the list of those approved bylaws can be viewed on the city's website. And we are on to 2 administrative motions on the agenda, which are to be moved by Councillor Louis, seconded by Councillor Jang. Is there any discussion of administrative motions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor on the administrative motions? Any opposed? None opposed? And so those motions are carried unanimously. And we move on to 3 motions on notice. And the first of those is a park board-led consultation and development of the Southeast Vancouver Senior Centre, which is to be moved by Councillor DeGenova. That needs a seconder. Councillor Affleck will second. And Council has received requests to speak on this motion. So that's a consideration that we refer to tomorrow's Planning, Transportation, Environment meeting to hear from speakers. There's a memo also on the agenda that is of concern to me, and when I look at this motion and read the memo from our city manager, I wanted actually to ask the city manager to just give further explanation in terms of this motion and the implications of council considering the motion. You raised legal concerns in the memo, And so before we consider next steps with referral, I appreciate your input to council with respect to the motion and the legal complexities of that. Councillor Carr, do you have a point of order?
Is your statement that there is a memo on the agenda? I don't believe at the beginning of this meeting when we had an alteration to the agenda that we added a memo to this particular idea or point. It was to administrative report number 3 that we added the memo from the park board. So I'm wanting clarification on this.
That is, yeah, you're right. That is a different memo that was on the agenda. On item number 3, you are correct. That was added February the 17th to the agenda. The memo I'm referencing was circulated to council last night on email.
Just making sure it's not on the agenda.
Sorry, yeah, I was mixing those two up. Council received a memo which I think the city manager distributed late yesterday, and that's where I would appreciate some input to council on your concerns raised in the memo, Madam City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So council, in response to the motion, and I did have some conversation with Councillor De Genova about the motion. There are a number of issues that that arises that in the memo I thought it important to clarify for you. The motion proposes that council write a letter to the Vancouver Park Board requesting the Park Board take the lead in all consultations and meetings with the public and key stakeholders relating to the senior center. That is underway and has been underway and has been the subject of a number of updates by me and council and also by memo to you, council, just giving you an update around this. There has been a lot of discussion about the senior center. Park Board staff and senior staff are involved in this, are underway speaking to a variety of seniors groups across the community. They have with them the architect who's doing the schematic designs for the senior center, Bruce Karskaden, who is a very, very skilled facilitator. There's been extensive consultation. It's going very well, and I believe that the general manager gave an update to the park board this week about that. So I think I can reassure you that that is already well underway and has been for some weeks. The other issue that was raised in this is that the City Council requests that Park Board be given basically oversight of project management of the development and oversight. And just to remind Council that in the shared services project that was put underway 6 years ago, we consolidated project management for major construction across the city, the VPD, the library, and the park board in facilities, real estate and facilities management with, at that time, Ken Bain was the general manager. Now Mr. Bill Ojala is our general manager. We have developed a center of excellence for major construction projects and minor ones underway. And the only activity that the park board currently undertakes on their own, with their own oversight, is the development of parks and park associated playground space and park amenities such as a skateboard park. But any facilities are built by the facilities and real estate management staff with the park board as their client. So the park board does lead the whole development of the functionality. They review with the public and key stakeholders, what's needed and that sort of thing. So they are very much the client, but facilities and real estate oversee that development. And many of the senior park board staff who used to run their own operation are actually now working in that area of the city. The only other thing that is really critically important for council to understand, because I think I've been updating you on a regular basis at the request often of Councillor Louis as to, what is the timeline for this project. It's public information that there are 6 community center associations suing the park board. And part of their claim, which is still outstanding, is that they claim an ownership, at least a partial ownership of those community center assets. And in my memo, I clearly outlined to you the city's position, which is public, and the park board's position as well on this, because we have responded to this litigation in court, and those are public documents, that we reject that claim very, very fundamentally. And furthermore, that until either that claim is settled or we have a new JOA that is underway, and we're working very hard with Commissioner Cooper to try and finalize that process, or there is an agreement that has legal standing that is signed by community center associations when we're undertaking capital redevelopment or renewal or renovation of those community center assets. Unless one of those three things occurs, which makes it very, very clear the ownership of these assets, we will not be able to proceed. And in the contribution agreements for both the federal and provincial governments who have partnered with us on this seniors project, all three levels of government, local government, us, the province, and the federal government have all contributed $2.5 million each. In those contribution agreements, and this is very standard for those kinds of contribution agreements, it's very, very clear that in order for us to receive that money and actually to have them sign the contribution agreement, we have to represent that we own the assets, and not only that, that we will continue to own them, and that if we do decide to dispose of those assets over the next 25 years, that we will have to pay back the remaining unamortized value of the capital improvement to the contributing level of government. So it's very, very clear that in order for this project to proceed, it has to be very clear the city owns the assets. We're working with the association involved, the Killarney Community Center Association. I think staff feel that this will be rectified in time for the tendering process for the design build contractor to be issued and completed by September 2015. But it is an issue that still needs to be resolved. So those are the three issues. Park board staff have been well out in front of the consultation. Secondly, the oversight of this project will remain in the purview of real estate and facilities, but their client is clearly park board. And thirdly, we do have to finalize in clear legal terms the ownership of the proposed senior center before the city can proceed with tendering out for design build contractor.
Councillor DiGenova, I think I just had, yeah, it's either a point of order or there's no such thing in our procedure bylaw. A question. I'm seeking advice from the city manager to consider whether this motion is even in order, given the legal framework here. And that's, so my question, maybe just to be more direct on my concern with the resolutions, in particular the second, sounds like with the first, the work is taking place, but I'm concerned that on the second part of the resolution, that there is, well, that it's basically impossible given the legal construct that we have right now. There's no way for council to advance this.
Yes, it can't be advanced, Mr. Mayor, until we have the requisite agreements in place. All the work is being done in anticipation of that, but we will not be able to expedite the approval of this until we've reached those agreements.
Okay, Councillor DiGenova, you have a point of order?
488, the park board shall have exclusive possession of an exclusive jurisdiction and control of all areas designated as permanent public parks of the city. So considering this portion of the charter, I'm confused as to how the city can own something that is under the park board's possession. And it's my understanding that the land that's been allocated for the Killarney Senior Center is a standalone piece of land on parkland, which would mean it would be in the possession of the park board. And furthermore, I don't see any formal agreement with any of our community center associations that say that they would run the senior center. So I'm concerned as to why this this motion would not be heard, considering the Vancouver Charter clearly states the park board has possession of the land.
Madam City Manager, do you want to weigh in on that?
Maybe if I could clarify, Mayor and Council, possession of land is not equivalent to ownership. You can take possession of any object and have possession of it. It does not speak to ownership rights. And so the ownership of all the land that is controlled and as set out in the Vancouver Charter by the Park Board, the ownership is very, very clear. It is the city's land. It are the city facilities, and that's been clear for a long time, Councillor. The Park Board has stewardship of those facilities. So the possession is not equivalent to ownership. So that's the reason. And in terms of your comment that we don't have an agreement, it's true that the JOA never contemplated any question of ownership by the associations. It is absolutely silent. It was never felt necessary because it was an absolute given. It's very clear that any new JOA will have to be very, very explicit about that. And in the absence of that having been completed, that process being completed, which is well underway, and I think Councillor Cooper holds great hope that it will be completed in an expedited way. But in order for us to advance this, we will have to have some other form of very explicit legal agreement that actually makes clear that the ownership of any new asset built as a senior center on the Killarney Community Center site will actually clearly be owned by the city. And that, otherwise, if we can't do that, for a start, we'll be giving back the money to the province and the federal government.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Louis, a point of order.
Given the memo by the city manager and the explanation as requested by yourself, Mr. Mayor, I would assert that the motion as put forward by Councillor DiGenova is out of order on both parts. First, that the first component is underway, that it is standing, and the Park Board, through its staff, are undertaking all the work that is described in the motion and is redundant. The second component is of greater concern, that in fact the language that it contemplates the Park Board taking over control and of the direction of construction is counter to the funding agreements, in fact, and the legal ramifications in regards to the suits that has currently been filed against the Park Board are currently out of line with the current federal funding agreement, where it states that the recipient represents and warrants to Canada that, and the recipient being the City of Vancouver as a signatory of that document, that there are no actions, suits, investigations, or other proceedings pending or to the knowledge of the recipient threatened, and there is no order, judgment, or decree of any court or governmental agency which could materially and adversely affect the recipient's ability to carry out the activities, and it goes on and on. There is a current suit that is underway, and until, as the city manager has stated, we get a resolution of that situation either through a new JOA, resolve it through the courts and through litigation, or have a carve-out agreement that states that this is not part of any of that. Preference, of course, being that we get to a new JOA. This is by too long not being a satisfactory situation in our city. So given those facts that we cannot put ourselves in jeopardy and we cannot be in contravention with these funding agreements, I would suggest that this is out of order and that we should not be taking this direction. Lastly, that we do have a standing policy of council that we would go through our facility and real estate services development arm in order to develop, and this is the reason why we did that was through our strategic review of Vancouver, where we would find the additional efficiencies in order to provide the services that our citizens wanted, but in the most efficient way. And this was the most efficient way after we had done extensive work to reorganize our departments in our city and to move back to a different model, which is less efficient, I think would be a disservice to our community. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
A little microphone difficulty here. I mean, that was a lengthy explanation of the rationale, and I'm noting that we had a memo on this and further explanation from Councillor DiGenova. You have a point of order?
Yes, I do.
And which point in the procedure bylaw are you? raising.
This motion, as Councillor Louis has stated, that this motion is out of order for the reason of the city manager, or Madam City Manager's memo, that we may be in a situation of legalities. I'm not sure still as to what the senior center has to do with the lawsuit, as there's been no formal agreement with any party as to who will run that. And I understand that city or park board, I mean, we can argue about this all day, but the city then would own the senior center. So I don't see how this has anything to do with perhaps the lawsuit, unless there is some formal agreement with one of the community center associations to run the senior center, which I haven't seen. So I would think that this motion stands alone and is in order.
Yeah, that's, well, I appreciate you explaining your case. It's not a point of order. In going through the memo and hearing from the city manager on this, my decision is that the motion is out of order, that you know, under section 4.3, that it clearly, and it may be a few of those subsections within 4.3 that it breaches, but it is not in order for council to consider. So I will rule that out of order, and we will move on to the next motion on notice, and look forward to seeing progress on that front. I think everyone on council has been years and years of working on this, and partners are lined up. We want to see this advance as quickly as possible. So appreciating the intention, Councillor DiGenova, and I know that all of council is wanting to see the Southeast Van Senior Center advanced as quickly as possible, but this is not the way to do it, in keeping with council's direction to date and the legal constraints that we face here. Okay, so we're going to go on to the second motion on notice. That's the request for leaves of absence for civic business for Councillor Jang. Anyone move that? Councillor Stevenson will move that. A seconder. Councillor Deal seconds. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? And that carries. The third is a request for leave of absence for civic business for Councillor Meggs. Can I have a mover for that? Councillor Louis moves, Deal seconds. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? And that carries. And we are on to notice of motion, new business inquiries, and other matters. Last item on our agenda, and Councillor Reimer is first up.
Thank you, Mayor Robertson. I have all of the above. So why don't I start with a motion on notice that I putting on notice for the next council meeting. It's fairly straightforward. It's was exactly mirrors a motion passed by the council in Esquimalt on February 2nd that asks for municipalities, and theirs in particular, and those around British Columbia, to call on the province of British Columbia to reverse their 2010 agreement to harmonize the environmental assessment of the Kinder Morgan and request that the province of BC conduct an independent environmental assessment. We have passed a motion similar to this in the past, so I don't foresee it being an issue, but did want to give you plenty of time to consider it. There were no documents, so I provided no links, but if you need more information, I know you all have my email. Second thing, in addition to it being Lunar New Year for all of the cultures that you listed off in the proclamation, Mayor Robertson, many of our coastal First Nations also celebrate and observe the Lunar New Year as their Lunar New Year. The Nisga'a Nation, once again, held its, for the Sandkees, the off-reserve Nisga'a here in Vancouver, held their big Hawaii celebration at the Pacific National Exhibition, PNE, on February 6th and 7th. Last year, I believe they gave us paddles as gifts. This year, they gave us this really beautiful drum, which I left on my desk. So they gave us this very beautiful drum which is supposed to be oriented like that, and wanted to pass on their thanks to us as a council for our motion in July of last year, recognizing the unceded territory of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh. So I'll bring this to you after the meeting. The last thing, I had a question for staff, but the staff member is not here, and it pertains to a motion that I think will also be put on notice and my understanding of whether it's in order or not. So I might just wait until Councillor Carr speaks, and then maybe the staff member will be back and I can get the information that I need. It's specifically related to the decision yesterday by the federal government to uphold the 3 nautical mile limit on sewage discharge, so that, as I understand it, I was doing some compass measurements of the Burrard Inlet, that none of the Burrard Inlet is, there's no space where it's 11 kilometers or less, so this would not, although interested to discuss the issue that is pertinent, but as I understand it, this issue, the concept of a no discharge zone already exists in the Burrard Inlet. So I'll wait and see what happens when Councillor Carr introduces her motion.
Okay, and you will have that opportunity shortly. Councillor Carr is next.
Yes, I would like to give notice of motion, and I think it should be on the screen in front of you. I do want to apologize that earlier motion circulated was an earlier version before I amended it myself after reprising myself of the debate that occurred at Park Board last night. So this motion does have a bit of different language, and particularly responds to some of the issues raised by Park Board commissioners in response to a motion that had been developed by both Catherine Evans, Commissioner Catherine Evans, and Commissioner Michael Wiebe, and passed unanimously last night. Their concerns were around specifically the enforcement of non-discharge or no discharge from smaller boats. So I've strengthened that section of the motion. Councillor Reimer's right. There's no area in the Burrard Inlet that's 3 nautical miles. You can't be in a boat and be less than 3 nautical miles from shore. However, the pursuit of designation of a non-discharge zone for boating sewage does come with a great deal of cooperative effort amongst municipalities, First Nations, Transport Canada itself around enforcement, and I think that there was an opportunity there for us to pursue, and at the very minimum, as my motion says, to at least have the discussion and assessment of that designation's costs and benefits, notwithstanding the pursuit of that particular designation, at the minimum to work with and urging and supporting Transport Canada to achieve stringent enforcement of the non-discharge of boating sewage. So it really is emphasizing those elements of both the designation and our response to the problem, which got the people up in arms when Transport Canada thought to reduce the discharge zone from 3 nautical miles to 1 nautical mile, which they reversed yesterday.
Okay, we may be in, notice is being called. I'm concerned that we're in similar zone to the last, to Councillor DiGenova's motion, in terms of whether or not this is in fact in order, given the action taken yesterday and given the fact that the Burrard Inlet is effectively already a no discharge zone. And our staff, sorry? Maybe just to clarify here, Councillor Reimer.
So there is a legal designation of no discharge zone in the States, and that seems to be, from your comments, that's the Environmental Protection Agency does it, because of course they don't have the same rules as we do, so you have to have this in the U.S. My question is that sort of what you were foreseeing, the rules as they relate to the When you say no discharge zone, what do you mean that would be different than the no discharge zone that already exists?
Councillor Carr.
Canada does have, so it's not the EPA I'm looking at, and there has been an area, the Brastor Lake, which is actually an inland sea in the Maritimes, which has gone through this designation. The designation is one that encompasses all of the communities around that inland sea, and has a very robust plan that gets developed collaboratively around the discharge. So, for example, there is a review of discharge facilities. There was a plan to provide more discharge facilities. I think in Vancouver we have a problem in the Broad Inlet where boats who are not berthed in marinas don't have necessarily access to discharge facilities, and this could be something worth pursuing, you know, in and of itself. There's also monitoring that takes place, which it appears by the letter that the City of Vancouver sent to Transport Canada in response to its opening up in September of changes to the rules around discharging, and that's when they proposed reducing the limit from 3 nautical miles to 1 nautical mile. Our own letter said that there was a real concern around the fact that we need to greatly improve enforcement of discharge. So that's all part of it.
Councillor.
Now, or are we going to make a decision on procedure? I'm impressed by Councillor Carr's passion, but I'm not sure what relevance it is to us.
Of looking at more stringent enforcement of non-discharge of boating sewage, and about the assessment of the designation of a non-discharge zone in terms of its costs and benefits. Those are perfectly in order, I would argue, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, I don't see your first point about enforcement. There isn't anything in the resolution.
It's in, you don't look at the copy, look at the copy on, it's changed from that.
It's changed since we got in here.
And it's in, yes. So if you look to point B in the therefore be it resolved.
Okay, that's new and different from what we've seen.
Suspended in 2008, done in 2007, suspended in 2008, and subsequently enacted by the provincial government. So perhaps it sounds like there's a lot of confusion. Although I agree with the general intent, there seems to be some confusion about what mechanism would actually achieve what is a shared concern around enforcement of existing regulations. So perhaps that would solve the issue. Sorry, so that we refer the motion and get the memo that clarifies what in fact our jurisdiction is here, as well as what mechanisms already exist to deal with discharge.
That would, so at this point, we have a motion on notice. A notice has been called. Madam City Clerk, is it appropriate to refer that to staff to come back with a memo prior to the motion being considered by council?
Mr. Mayor, yes, it would be appropriate. As I understand it, it would be council's intent to refer the motion to a future meeting, but also have a memo from staff in relation to legal authority or jurisdiction relative to the motion shared with council. And at that time, then council would have the information required in order to make a decision as to how to proceed with this motion.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. I believe the procedure bylaws state that when notice has been called on a motion during inquiries, motions on notice of motions and other matters, that the city clerk must place the motion on the agenda of the next council meeting. It would be, I would argue, in order for another councillor to say they would like a memo to accompany that, but I believe it must be placed on that one. If we decide at the next meeting that it needs more work, we can debate it at that time.
Yeah, that's the clarification I was seeking from Madam City Clerk in terms of the requirement. If notice is being called, motion's being moved, and notice is being called, are we still able to have a referral motion that adds that stipulation for a staff memo to be provided clarifying jurisdiction?
Mr. Mayor, yes, you may make that, council may make that request.
That may move that motion, a referral motion? Is that what
the motion and the notice of the councillor's intent to move the motion has been provided for a future meeting. For that, a referral is not technically required under the procedure bylaw. She's giving her notice of intent to bring forward the motion. Council may, in so doing, also ask that staff provide a memo in relation to that motion, and then how that motion is dealt with at that meeting would be determined by you as chair in accordance with the procedure bylaw.
Okay, but do we require an additional motion to add the staff memo?
No, the direction is sufficient.
Okay. Okay, so we've got clarity on that. That'll come back to us with a staff memo prior to council considering next steps on jurisdiction with Transport Canada, and we'll see that again. So we are on to, where are we on to here in the, Councillor Reimer, you had your, Councillor DiGenova, you have new business, other matters, inquiries?
Yes, I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank staff very much for another great and informative tour. Yesterday I had the opportunity to tour Vancouver Fire Services, as well as to take a look at all of the emergency preparedness that they've been working on, as well as the Fire Protection Service and the Tactical Training Center. And I learned there that all of the ammunition used at that facility is green ammunition, and that means that we're being more environmentally friendly, and it poses less of a health risk to all of the people who train there. So I just, when there is lead in it, I understand that there is. So I just wanted to thank all of the staff, especially the city clerk's office, for arranging these tours, and they're very informative, and thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Meggs is next.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I refrain from the temptation to follow up on that, but I have an inquiry for the city manager, which she may wish to answer later by note or something like that, but many of us, we all are receiving queries about TELUS's proposal for a digital sign, and I know that for some time staff have been working on a review of the sign bylaw, and I don't know what to say to people who are asking whether or not we'll see a comprehensive change in policy before we deal with the TELUS sign, which is digital and according to press reports has a number of elements in it that may not align with our obsolete, long out of date, in my view, sign bylaw. So just curious to know on the progress of that policy discussion.
Madam City Manager.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor and Council, thanks, Councillor Meggs. The sign bylaw initiative, the review of the sign bylaw is underway. In my discussions with the General Manager of Planning and Development Services, his feeling is that it's probably going to be 6 to 8 months before it can come to council and be confirmed. I think it's quite clear from what I understand that the consideration of the TELUS sign will have to happen in advance of that. But I think that there's been a lot of background work done by staff in terms of looking at other jurisdictions and you know, where signage is going in municipalities, that we will be able to inform the discussion that will be undertaken around the TELUS requirements, so that you can, you know, you'll have a sense of where the world is going in advance of that. So
Supplementary, if I may, Mr. Mayor. This goes to the question of third-party sponsorship too, and I know there's always people in the cultural community who would like to see progress on that front as well. what they would see as progress. Perhaps not all of council would agree, but I do hope that we can bring that report forward in a comprehensive way so we're not stuck with one-off deliberations in many public hearings when perhaps a policy would clarify for applicants what council was supportive of and what it wasn't.
Yes, I think the issue of third-party sponsorship and third-party signage, particularly as it relates to civic buildings, is obviously you know, a significant issue for us, and particularly for the cultural community, where you know, we often, as it relates to our cultural amenities, are asking them to go and raise philanthropic funds and work with, you know, all the different donors in the broad community. And so I think that, you know, it's not my sense that staff has been asked to come back to address that particular issue, but we'd be very happy to do that.
I certainly have been told by staff that it is part of that consideration, so if I'm wrong, I'd like to have that cleared up, because I anticipate trouble on that front too.
Can get back to you about that.
Okay, I have no further speakers on the queue, which means we have come to the end of our agenda. That means we need a motion to adjourn. Councillor Reimer, and seconded by Councillor Carr. All those in favor? Any opposed? And that carries. This meeting is adjourned, and we will convene in camera at 1 o'clock sharp.